I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays for the Sabby and JB show. And you can catch me here typically on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and every other Sunday. So yesterday, I was supposed to go live with these news stories yesterday. And I've been having some difficulty with my car. So I literally just got my car out of the shop a little over a week ago. Separate issue, but a little over a week ago, my windshield wipers actually stopped working. So I had to take my car in because it wasn't one of those quick fix where I could just replace the blade with, it wasn't like that. Like the entire thing wasn't moving at all. And it snows here. So there's that. So I just got it out of the shop over a week ago. And now when I press on the brakes, it's making this loud noise like like that every time I press on the brakes. So I'm assuming it's probably the brake pads. I'm hoping that's all it is. But yeah, so I had to take my car back again. This is probably the fourth time in the past couple of months. You know, my car is old, and my husband said the same thing. He was just like, your car is old. And I'm like, I know. I've had that car for years, but still. So God, it's not something else, it's something else. I tell you another thing. So that's why you didn't see me live yesterday. So I had to reschedule this stream for today, and today's a holiday. So, what happened to my eye? Nothing. Huh. Mizu, what type of car? It's a Hyundai Elantra. And I've had it since 2011, actually. So I've had it for a long time. But anyway, hopefully we'll get this fixed and taken care of, because I feel like I've put a lot of money into this car. And at the same time, I don't want to get a new car because I don't want a car payment again. And so I'm just trying to do what I can with the car situation. But yeah, oh man, it's a something. So that's why I'm actually doing this show today. Typically I would not be live at this time, but all that jazz that happened yesterday, it was a hot mess. So here I am. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, and Twitter. So for those of you that are subscribed to my newsletter, you probably got the notification that I was going live today at 3 p.m. So this is why it's good to subscribe to my newsletter, because you'll get notifications when I go live, because you can't just rely on the YouTube notification, because it doesn't even work for me sometimes. Like there's times like there are people that I'm already subscribed to and I religiously watch, but I'm not getting the notification for them. So that's why I do that through the newsletter. Anywho, let's go ahead and give a shout out to Sabby patrons. Thank you guys so much for your support. We have pretty interesting things to discuss today. Thank you to everyone who is a Sabby patron. If you're interested in becoming a patron, I have 5 categories: Ultimate, Sabinators, Sabsters. There's also Sabbies, which I say, of course, are quite a meaty bunch there. And of course, members. All of their names are listed here. And you can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen on the ticker. And I couldn't remember if I announced these last show, so I want to make sure I do it now. Shout out to new Sabby patrons. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up for Greatly Blessed and Bide. Thank you. Thank you both so much. Have another quick announcement because I don't want to forget this. Wednesday, Scott Ritter will actually be here. So this week is going to be kind of funky. Scott Ritter will be here Wednesday. Typically, if I have an interview with someone in the afternoon, I'll usually record that and upload it as a premiere. So it'll all depend what happens Wednesday, whether or not I do this as a live or not. I hate to just do a live stream with just an interview and no other news stories. So that's the thing. So we'll see what happens. Either way, expect an interview with myself and Scott Ritter this week. So stay tuned for that. And I'll also be live tomorrow night as well, my usual time. So let's go ahead and show that thumbnail so we can discuss what we are going to talk about today, because it has been quite a doozy. Today, we are discussing Briahna Joy Gray destroys Dean Phillips. If you have not seen that conversation with Bree and Dean, you need to watch the entire thing. For the sake of this show, we are going to focus on one particular topic that was discussed during that interview. So we're only going to focus on that one subject. I'm also going to discuss Bassem checks Chris Cuomo. So yes, believe it or not, Chris Cuomo actually interviewed Bassem. You guys have seen him on the show before. He's a comedian. I've discussed him on the show before. He's really good on the Israel-Gaza issue, but he's also really funny because he's a comedian. So this is an interesting conversation that they had. And there's something I want to highlight in reference to what I've noticed that Chris Cuomo is doing. And we're also going to discuss, of course, you guys have probably heard this by now, but Alexei Navalny has died. So we're going to discuss that story. We're going to talk about who he actually was, how the media is talking about Alexei. And we're also going to talk about some of the criticisms that came that way in reference to that story and how people chose to, basically give him a shout out. We're going to talk about that as well. And we're also going to discuss, this story is a doozy, and I wish more people will cover this. If you live in the Boston area, they are actually considering doing something that I think is honestly ridiculous. It wouldn't be the first time they did something that is ridiculous, but this I feel like is a penalty on people who are working class and people who make, a certain amount of money, so much to the point that they have to live further away. We're going to get into that. And that's why you see a picture there of Mayor Michelle Wu, because this is her. This is all her. So we're going to talk about that, and we'll get into the ballot measure results for Maine of 2023. So let's go ahead and jump in. So this Boston story is a doozy. So first of all, for those of you who have never been here or you don't live here, I have to explain to you that the public transportation system in Boston is incredibly old. It was the first one in the country, but it's also the weakest one in the country. It's not as efficient as New York City's subway system. It doesn't run 24 hours. I think the cutoff time is like 1 o'clock in the morning, maybe for the buses. So if you work third shift, obviously you're not going to be able to rely on the subway to get back and forth to work. So that's the first thing I want you to know. It is also not accessible to a lot of people, meaning that the subway system that we have here in Boston, it doesn't cover a lot of areas. Unlike New York City subway, you can pretty much rely on it everywhere. Maybe except for some parts of Queens. There are some parts of Queens where you have to rely on the bus or whatever. But the thing is, it is larger than the Boston system. And this is why a lot of people in New York City don't own a car. A lot of people in Boston still do. So this is coming through. They're actually trying to penalize people who drive to work. I'm not kidding. So this came through. Congestion pricing is back on the table for Boston drivers. Here's what that would mean. So this is crazy. Many city councilors support an order for a hearing to learn about the benefits and drawbacks of imposing fees on drivers entering busy areas. The busiest area here, obviously, is Boston. After that, second would probably be Worcester, but you get the point. Let's dive in here because this is wild. Boston City Council is set to explore the possibility of implementing a congestion pricing system and the impacts it could have on residents. Congestion pricing is a method of reducing traffic and emissions by charging fees for those on the roadways during certain hours of the day. So obviously, the busiest time of the day is rush hour on the roads, the morning rush hour and the evening rush hour. So obviously, this is meant to punish those that have to drive to work. And I'm going to show you what the map looks like and everything so you can understand where I'm coming from, because I don't feel like this is fair. Counselor Tania Fernandez Anderson introduced a hearing order on the matter during Wednesday's city council meeting. Any sort of congestion pricing plan for Boston still has many hurdles to clear, but Fernandez said that now is the time to foster a deeper conversation on the idea. Constituents have told Fernandez that they are concerned about traffic in general and streets getting narrower and more congested due to the addition of bus and bike lanes. There are also concerns about emergency vehicles successfully navigating crowded streets. Okay, so is there a lot of traffic here? Absolutely. I can't deny that, right? Has the traffic increased? Yes. And I would say the traffic has significantly increased since the pandemic because a lot of people stopped taking the subway and started to drive because they felt safer not being around as many people, etc. Problem is, when things started to get back to normal, more people didn't decide I'm going to take the subway again. A lot of people are driving to work, but that is just a small part of the problem. The bike lanes, the bus lanes. This is something that was new. It was implemented a couple of years ago where they decided to create these bus lanes. So only the bus, meaning the MBTA bus, public transit, can drive down those lanes. Cars can't drive down those lanes. The problem is Boston is very dense. So when you add an extra lane on streets that are already narrow, obviously that's going to create some issues there. But the idea was to encourage more people to stop driving and to take public transportation. Let's go on here. Fernandez gave brief remarks Wednesday about the potential benefits of congestion pricing while underscoring the importance of helping underserved communities manage the impacts of such a plan. I'm of the mindset that we as a city should use the tax dollars, our constituents' resources, to invest in transitioning populations or different families, especially of marginalized backgrounds, to be able to get them to a place where transit is an option. Not forcing this as a policy on the city, but I just want to have a conversation about the possibilities. What does that even mean? Forcing them to a place where transit is a possibility. Does that mean you're talking about displacing people even more in Boston? Because the reality is, and you'll see this when I show you the map, a lot of the poor neighborhoods in Boston don't have access to public transportation, particularly the subway. You'll see this in a majority of Dorchester. You'll see this in parts of Roxbury. You'll see this. You'll notice when you come here that most of the subway stops, the areas that are, I would say, more well off financially, they have more access to public transportation. The poorer the neighborhood, the less access you have to public transportation within the city. Then there's the issue outside of the city. For people who live in the greater Boston area, which includes myself, yes, we have a commuter rail that goes to those cities and towns right outside of Boston, but even the commuter rail doesn't service all the towns and all the cities. So there are people that live in certain parts of Lynn that have no choice but to drive to work. If you live in Saugus, you got to drive to work. If you live in Stoneham, you have to drive to work. Now, these are all like literally right there, right next to Boston. But for whatever reason, when the subway was designed and the commuter rail was designed, it decided not to service certain towns and certain cities. So this is why a lot of people drive, right? It goes on to say, in the hearing order, Fernandez-Anderson referenced efforts by New York officials to implement congestion pricing in Manhattan. It could go into effect as soon as the spring. So for all my peeps that live in New York City, this could be coming your way too. In December, the Board of New York's Metropolitan Transportation Authority voted in favor of recommendations that a $15 fee be imposed on cars entering Manhattan below 60th Street once per day. The recommendations called for commercial trucks to pay up to $36 and for extra fares on taxis, Uber, and Lyft rides. In New York, drivers who make less than $50,000 a year would not have to pay the fees for the first 10 trips into the designated congestion zone each month. Emergency vehicles would be exempt, as would vehicles transporting people with disabilities and drivers who live in the congestion zone and make $60,000 or less per year. So here's the thing. If they were to use that same model here in Boston, there's a lot of people that live in this area that make over maybe just roughly 55,000. A lot of the academic advisors at some of these elite institutions, around 55,000, maybe 58,000, that kind of thing. So they're not making a lot of money and the cost of living is high here. So they would not be exempt from the congestion fee if Boston were to follow the same model from New York. Now, let me show you why this is a problem. It's time to pull up the subway map. Because I think what people don't understand, especially if you don't live here. So this is the subway map here in Boston. And the purple line, we'll go on just a little bit here. The purple line is the commuter rail. So this is the trains that actually services those other towns and cities right outside of Boston. But like I said, not many of them. Not as many as you think it would be. And then, of course, the red, the green, the orange, and the blue, and the silver, those are the ones that predominantly serve inside of Boston, Cambridge, parts of Somerville, with the exception of the red line, which goes all the way down to Braintree, which is another city here in Massachusetts. It also goes to Quincy, but that line sucks. I'm just telling you from experience, it is a doozy. You'll see another extension of the red line here to Mattapan and Ashmont. That's still Boston. So the problem that you run into is this. You have the green line, which for whatever reason, the B green line decided to just serve Boston University and Boston College. I don't know who came up with that idea. And parts of Newton, right? So the green line, again, these are the more wealthier areas. The B, the C, the D, which mainly takes up most of Newton, which is one of the wealthiest cities here. It's right next to Boston. Brookline, you see how they have so much more access? And then when you look at the poor areas here, if you go over towards the Roxbury area, etc., notice you don't see as much. This silver line is just a bus. I don't know why they call it the silver line. It's just a bus. So they mainly put a lot of the buses in the poor areas. And if you're down here deep in Dorchester, you have to pretty much rely on taking a bus, sometimes to another bus and another bus, depending on where you need to go. So this is the subway system. We go all the way up here to Chelsea. Oak Grove is right here. Here's Malden Center, etc. Now, notice the cutoff is right here. Let me show you the problem. If we look at the map in Boston, let me zoom out just a little bit because I'm going to show you what is not being serviced. So you'll see here's Braintree that I referred to right down here. There's Quincy. Okay. Let's go up. Come and tell you who gets missed. And we'll zoom in just a little bit. So here's Boston. Here's Alston, which is also part of a neighborhood in Boston. Watertown, for example, has no subway stop. None. There's bus. You can take the bus from Watertown into Boston, but there's no subway. Waltham, no subway. Like, I don't know who came up with this system. So these people, the people in Waltham and Watertown, these people are more likely to have to drive into work. Weston, which is the wealthiest town in Massachusetts, that's actually where David Ortiz used to live there when he played for the Red Sox. Not sure if he still lives there now, but it's not uncommon to find Red Sox players that live in Weston. Weston, no public transit, no subway stop, none, no commuter rail stop. These people have to drive. So, and then we go north. Boston, Cambridge, Somerville has subway access for the most part. Medford has limited subway access. Then we get to Malden, limited subway access. Everett has no subway stops. Revere has limited subway access. Now we're starting to get to some of the towns that are more working class. We go up to Saugus. Saugus has no subway access. So you guys see a pattern here? You see a trend? Okay. Lynn, very limited subway access. I think most people that live in Lynn have to take the bus, right? So we'll go up again. Over here to the left, we have Lexington. Lexington is also a pretty wealthy area. A lot of the professors from MIT and Harvard live over in Lexington. There's also a lot of doctors that live there. These people, again, they can drive to the Acton commuter rail stop, park there, and get on that commuter rail line, right? But again, you see the difference. Woburn, which also used to be working class, is becoming more expensive now. Limited access. There's one commuter rail stop. Stoneham, none. Wakefield, limited. Reading, limited. Burlington, limited. So you see how, but then if you go over to the east, Peabody has one commuter rail stop. Salem has a commuter rail stop. Beverly has a commuter rail stop. You go a little bit further in, Linfield, none. Or I think one commuter rail stop. Middleton, none. All of these. And as you go further, by the way, these towns are not that far from Boston. You're talking about a 30-minute drive without traffic. So as we look further, let me just zoom in here because I want to show you something else. Then we get into the heart of Boston. And I want to show you something here. Dorchester. Dorchester is probably the largest neighborhood in Boston. And Dorchester has very limited subway access. It's a predominantly Black area. There's the northern part used to be Irish, the southern part, predominantly Black area. Very limited access. And as you go to the South Shore, what people call the South Shore, we'll go a little bit further here. You have Roslindale, you have Milton. Milton's pretty well-to-do as well. You have Quincy. Quincy does have the access. Dedham, limited. Like, the problem is, guys, most people, you go to Randolph, limited, right? Canton has one commuter rail stop. I think you guys get the point. The problem that you're running into is that obviously it is cheaper for you to live outside of the city if you're renting. Like, for example, Lexington's expensive to buy a home, but if you want to rent in Lexington, it's probably going to be cheaper than it is in Boston. If you want to rent an apartment in Newton, it's going to be cheaper than it is in Boston. So if you have a limited amount of funds and you have to live further away because the rent is cheaper, now they're trying to tell you that basically if you live in these areas that don't have public transportation, they're trying to penalize you for driving to work. And not everybody, again, is able to live in the city. And when I see in that article that they say they're going to try to find ways to encourage them to have access to public transit, what I hear, the underlying tone of that is they're going to try to displace them. What I am starting to see, I feel like they're trying to cram everybody in to the city, and they're trying to make it so that you don't have a car and they just want you to walk, bike, or take public transportation. And that's not feasible for everybody. First of all, everybody cannot afford to live in the city. So I don't know who came up with this idea, but I think this is a bad idea. And I think it's going to be it's going to penalize people who are working class, people who are poor. It's going to penalize people. A lot of people that live in these marginalized, areas, they're the ones who are going to be penalized. And it is true. If you come here, you'll see it. They can't help it that they can't afford to live in the city. They can't help it that there's no public transportation in their town. And I've often pushed back on this multiple times because this is how I see it. I see it this way. If public transportation, we were the first public transit system in the country. You mean to tell me all these years have gone by and we never got to the level that New York City did with public transportation, where it doesn't matter if you're within that mile radius, you have a subway stop near you. So there have been a lot of failures in reference to the public transportation system. Now they're considering charging people and making them basically pay this penalty because they have to drive to work. And if you want to talk about the climate issue, you want to talk about the environment, which they mentioned in that article as well, maybe we should stop giving $10 million to Israel every year. For those of you who did not know, Boston gives $10 million to Israel every year, and Israel is bombing not just Gaza, but I saw the news earlier today, they're bombing Lebanon again, this time not on the border, but deep in the heart of Lebanon. So if you want to talk about the environment and the climate, you need to be pushing to stop the wars. Now, part of it is the funding. Because Act on Mass, this is an organization here. They actually try to hold our legislators in the state house accountable. That's what Act on Mass is for. So Act on Mass, they pointed this out, the MBTA's failing funding structure and its origin. So I just want to jump down to the part where they talk about that right here. The MBTA, let me make this bigger, sorry. The MBTA has been struggling to pay their bills since their change in funding structure in 2000. And now they are facing even larger deficits due to hefty costs of debt payments, safety plan implementation, and operating expenses. According to the MBTA CFO, Mary Ann O'Hara, the projected MBTA budget deficit discussed for next fiscal year was $182 million, and this number could amount to $859 million over the next 5 years. The debt that the MBTA continues to pay for accrues faster than the rate at which the MBTA is able to pay off these debts. Translation: the big dig debt is growing faster than we can pay it off. By the time the debt is paid off, which is projected to be in 2040, the MBTA is expected to have paid more than $8 billion in debt and interest payments. That's $8 billion in costs that were not supposed to be the responsibility of the MBTA, $8 billion that could have been spent chipping away at the Murad safety issues plaguing the transit system or upgrading its archaic equipment. So yes, public transportation here, it is archaic. It's like nothing you've ever seen, because when I first moved here, I was like, that's the subway. Now, why did that happen? Part of that has to do with the administration. Under Governor Deval Patrick's administration, they actually decided to forego the safety inspections. These trains are supposed to get these inspections every 5 years, and they're supposed to be upgraded. They decided not to do that. And to that, I ask, what happened to all that money? This is why we're in this situation to begin with. But now you want to punish the people and you want to charge the people because you didn't do what you were supposed to do in reference to making sure that these trains were maintained and in reference to expanding the public transit system. That was supposed to happen years ago. Has not happened. So you have to be very careful about trying to blame the workers. And this is exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to blame the workers that can't afford to live in the city, so they have to live further away, and there's no public transportation near them, so they have to drive. They're trying to penalize the workers instead of penalizing the administration for mismanaging funds. It's crazy stuff, guys. But yet, this city is giving $10 million a year to Israel. Why didn't we take that $10 million back and invest it in our public transportation system? I'll go to some of the comments. It's a hot mess. Thank you for the super chat, Roger. Let's all pool money and Oprah her a new car. Interesting. All one the same, said Sabby. Eric T. Red, is tomorrow going to be the discussion of Julian Assange Day X? Thank you. Yes, I think I have that as one of my stories. Thank you, Roger. Don't forget Maine. Yes, I remember. Thank you for the super chat. I can't read your name. I'm sorry. Singapore's congestion pricing paid for new lines. I get that. But the point is, the workers should not be penalized. That's the thing. Thank you for the super chat, Sam. Love your show. Thank you for always defending the Palestinians. Sending love from the UK. Thank you so much, Sam. Let's give a shout out to Brett Rundgren for becoming a new Sabby member. Let's give Brett a big whoop whoop. Thank you for the super chat, Roger. Time for Boston CBI to stop that. Yeah, that would be good. I'll take the comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Sab, your mayor is doing what our governor Loco Hochul is doing for traveling south of the 60th in Manhattan. She already got the cameras up. This is an opportunity for Bostonians to use leverage against bosses to work from home. That right there is an opportunity to run a CBI for a municipalized Boston broadband, since that would increase the workload traffic online. Make lemons into lemonade. Thank you for this as well. Sab, I'll keep posting the question is, why are New Yorkers paying out of pocket for Metro cards to ride subways and buses? LIRR tickets when commuting between Long Island and New York City, and easy passes to cross bridges and go through tunnels when our taxes already pay for these things? That's a good question. The government is charging us 2 times. If New York State became a CBI state for amendments, the first things I'm pushing, one, to make double tax unconstitutional. Yeah, it's true. It's like they're charging us twice. It's ridiculous. Like, what are the taxes paying for? We have to start asking our representatives these questions. Okay. If you just joined, go ahead and smash that like button. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. Okay. We're going to go into this story with Briahna Joy Gray and Dean Phillips. And I have to say, I have to hand it to Bri because she really held her own, particularly with this subject that we're going to focus on when he talks about Israel and Gaza. Because what I noticed from Dean in this interview, particularly during this topic, I felt like he tried to use the sympathy card. I really do feel like he tried to get Bri to move in that direction. And to that point, you know, I ask, what about the sympathy for the Palestinian people? You know, it's kind of difficult to be sympathetic to the state that's in power, that's oppressing and occupying the people. And so before we get into this clip, I just want to say again, the Palestinian people are not in power. The state of Israel is in power. So we have to remember that when we go into this conversation. Let's go ahead and dive in.
What do you make then of people who push back and say it's a nice thing to say, but Biden is saying that knowing that it's not a possibility, one, because of Netanyahu, and two, because there has been this encroachment into Palestinian territory to an extent that it seems impossible. The experts seem to say it's next to impossible to imagine what a contiguous kind of a nation state would even look like at this point.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I dwell in possibilities. I don't want to keep going back to Biden, but man, he's been there 50 years, Briahna. 50, half of a century, 3/4 of the life of the state of Israel. The Foreign Relations Committee chairman, vice president for 8 years, president for 3. I'm someone who believes the proof is in the pudding. Show me the results. Is anything better in the Middle East than it was 50 years ago? It is exactly the same. We've wasted hundreds of billions of dollars, thousands of American lives, tens of thousands of Palestinian lives, thousands of Israeli lives. There's no more freedom in the entire region. There's more, if anything, there's less stability, more oppression, more misery. You know what? The proof is in the pudding, and I'm disgusted by it. And I think Netanyahu has to go. I think he is bad for the state of Israel. The settlement policy, a big part of the problem. I do envision a Palestinian state with Jewish people living in it, just as there's a Jewish state with Muslim Palestinians living in it. I think that would be healthy to have a shared, if you will, responsibility. And I think it's time for the entire world. I want to work with the Chinese to establish a Palestinian state. I think one of the biggest problems, believe it or not, Briahna, is since there's no other democracy in the Middle East other than Israel right now, I don't know if the Gulf nations and all the dictatorships and kingdoms are going to want to help create a state in which there will be free and fair elections and self-determination.
Pause. So let me show you what Dean just did here, right? So he's calling out the easy things. What I told you before, it's easy to say that Netanyahu is a problem and Netanyahu needs to go. The problem is, as I've said before, they can easily insert someone else to do the same things. So the solution is not just convincing Netanyahu to resign or convincing people in Israel not to reelect Netanyahu. That doesn't solve the problem. What Dean Phillips isn't calling out, which is what a lot of people are not willing to call out, particularly on mainstream media, the problem is Zionism. Because as long as Zionism is still there and you have this idea of this supremacy, state, it doesn't matter who the leader is that's in charge. The ideology is already, soaked into the population. So as long as Zionism is still the main ideology there in Israel, you're still going to continue to have this problem. 2, he mentions he would love to see a Palestinian state. But I have shown you over and over again, multiple times on this show, that is not possible. When people use this language of the two-state solution, I just talked to the ex-UN official, Craig Michaelbord. We just talked about this. People talking about a two-state solution. I've talked about this, 2 years now? There's no way you can have a two-state solution when Israel has all of those settlements in the West Bank. So for people who say, well, they can give those settlements back, you really think they're going to do that? You really think they're going to give back those homes freely? No, I don't think so. Too much has been taken from the Palestinian people for you to have a Palestinian state. And 3, the reason why Israel doesn't want Palestinians to have their own separate state is because that would mean that they would have to have an army, and they don't want them to have an army. So again, he's calling these things that he's saying are the things that are easy to point out, but he's not willing to go deeper, but Bree's going to push him. Listen to this.
Think about that, because if it happened for the Palestinians, others around the whole region are going to say, well, gosh, we want the same thing. So that's going to be one of the biggest impediments. But if we don't try, Israel will never be safe. And of course, Palestinians will never have any hope. And that is not a way to live.
I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but given the repeated long-term and stated commitment of these states to a Palestinian state, the fact that Saudi Arabia has stopped its normalization, its very profitable normalization with Israel, and the negotiations the United States has been doing in that regard because of its support, its people's support of Palestine, the fact that after having waged war on Yemen for all of these years, it is now weirdly standing on the same side because Palestine is such a uniting issue in the region. Obviously, so many Palestinian refugees live in these surrounding countries, not by choice, but because they were forced out by the creation of Israel in 1948. It is, if anything, the thing that seems to be uniting various religious groups and political disputes across the region like almost nothing else. But to stay just on this subject a little bit, because I want complete clarity, sure. I want to ask you if you see the value in there being religious pluralism and ethnic pluralism within Israel and within a future Palestinian state. And living in the United States of America, which has the second largest Jewish population, and frankly, after the events of October 7th, demonstrably the safest Jewish population in the world, why does there need to be a two-state solution as opposed to a one state solution that is genuinely democratic and that genuinely invests the same rights and privileges to both Arab, Christian, Muslim, and Jewish citizens.
I think, well, first, let me also say one thing about the Arab nations, which have done very little to help the Palestinian cause other than talk. Very, very little. In fact, when I was last in Saudi Arabia, I had to make some calls for them to reestablish paying their commitments to the East Jerusalem hospital. Over decades, the Palestinian cause, they would elevate when it was helpful to them, but then they'd forget about it. If there was really a will in the Arab world, the Middle East, to establish a Palestinian state, it could have been done decades ago and should have been.
What?
And it takes...
Pause. So Dean is doing what I've seen other people that are Democrats and Republicans that are pro-Israel do, this talking point that he's using, blaming the Arab countries that surround Gaza, right? First of all, it is not their responsibility to push Israel to call for a Palestinian state. He mentioned Saudi Arabia. He knows that Saudi Arabia is an ally of the United States. So why would Saudi Arabia go against Israel when they're an ally of the United States? Although Saudi Arabia is also, mixing in with BRICS too as well. But Dean knows these things. For you to put that responsibility on the other countries that surround Gaza, that is unfair. You see what I mean? Because as Nico explained when he came on here, this issue is between the United States, who is doing the funding of the weapons and has been funding Israel for years, Israel, and Gaza and the West Bank. Just because they share the same religion, they're supposed to advocate and come in and help and do all these things for Palestinian people? Like, this is really weird to me. This is really weird to me that you're putting that responsibility on the other Arab countries. And you're also assuming that they're all the same. They're not all the same. They have different cultures. The culture in Saudi Arabia may be different from the culture in Egypt. But this idea that they should have jumped in and should have done something. No, you're blaming the people that are the neighbors instead of blaming the country that has been occupying and has been oppressing these people for decades. The blame relies on Israel, and the blame relies on the United States for funding Israel in the first damn place, not the other countries that had nothing to do with this. That is a typical Zionist talking point, to point the fingers at the neighboring countries and say, well, you should have done something. No, Israel should not have occupied the people. Pay attention to that talking point.
Representative, how can you say, I really don't want to debate this, one, because I'm not an expert in the history of the region, but even my cursory knowledge, they all went to war over trying to have a Palestinian state. How can you say, and they're hosting millions of Palestinian refugees and have done so for years. So it starts to sound a little bit like you're making the argument that so many conservatives make, which is to say, nobody wants Palestinians anyway. The fact that Egypt won't let them be ethnically cleansed through the Rafah Gate is a demonstration of how horrible this population is. Can you see how that's what this is starting to sound like?
Mm-hmm.
But I respect you. That's not what it sounds like for me at all. I'm telling you.
No, he trips up a little bit here. She's right. He's making the same talking points that Ron DeSantis made. So you see how these parties aren't that different? They're not as different as you think, especially when it comes to Israel.
The historical truth. The Arab world has not done much to actually create Palestinian safety, security, and self-determination. And I'm telling you why. Because self-determination equals freedom, which equals a risk to their own kingdoms. It's just the truth, Briahna. That is absolutely the truth. And that's been very underappreciated undercurrent of, I think, why there hasn't been a state created, because America wants a democratic state, and I think Israel does too, because most of us believe democracy usually yields a government that is the most reasonable with which to work, not terror.
Let's debunk this democracy part, because they all have the same talking points. It's the only democracy in the Middle East. You guys know people that are LGBTQ can't even get married in Israel? You know that, right? You know, people that are different faiths. So if like you're Christian and let's say your partner is, they can't, interfaith marriage isn't even allowed in Israel. But they never point this out. They never mention this.
On the other hand, none of the other Arab states want that because freedom is a risk to themselves. That's the truth. I don't know why that sounds like a weird talking point.
Well, because
that's historically accurate.
It's against what they are quite explicitly stating, but we don't really have to litigate that. I don't think that's really front of people's mind.
I'm sharing some news that maybe people are not aware of, and that is the truth. They don't want a free and self-determination. They don't want self-determination.
But to get back to this.
And to get back to this point, another thing that's not being mentioned here as well, that Dean is leaving out. First of all, every time there were these negotiations or there was some type of push for a Palestinian state, what Dean is conveniently leaving out is that the Palestinian people want the right to return. And that was never offered. It would be like if you were pushed out of, let's say your state, North Carolina, you were pushed out of North Carolina by an oppressive force. You were pushed out, and then you're told you're not allowed to return back to North Carolina, which is your home. That's ridiculous. It's absurd, right? We got to remember, Israel is a state. It is the state of Israel. And this is exactly what they've done to the Palestinian people. So the Palestinians want the right to return, and Israel has never offered them that.
Question, because I would argue that the Jewish state has done not only not very much to help there being a Palestinian state, but has aggressively and against international law worked to thwart the existence of a Palestinian state, as has the United States of America and its Western allies. So the question on the table is, why not a one-state solution? We're Americans. We're proud of living in a religious and racial pluralistic society, a nation of immigrants.
I'll tell you very simply. I'm a Jewish person, and I do know history. And the fact is, Israel has been attacked since the very founding of the country in 1947, 1948. I think you know that. I'm sure everybody else knows that. Constantly attacked. This is well before settlements, well before anything else. This is the earliest lines of the state.
Paused. Jewish people and Palestinian people lived in Palestine side by side with each other before the creation of Israel. And they seem to get along just fine. Obviously, he's leaving out the fact that even back then, the Nakba, they pushed the Palestinian people out. We're supposed to sit here and pretend like they didn't kill these people. There's an entire documentary where you still had Israeli settlers bragging about what they did to the Palestinian people. Also, one of them bragging about sexually assaulting a teenage girl. This stuff is blatant out there for everybody to see. Everybody to see. And he conveniently leaves this out. So you come in and you take over the people's homes and land, and we're supposed to sit back here and believe that you're the ones that were attacked? You started the attacking. The founding of Zionism was always to create a greater Israel. It was never to live in harmony with the Palestinian people. And I say this because when Theodore Herzl, when he chose Palestine, and this was after he considered Uganda, when he chose Palestine, he lied. This land is open and available. Left out that there were already people there. There were already people there. So him leaving that out, and now he's trying to make it seem like Israel is the victim? Are you kidding me?
Attacked. No one even talks about it. Bus bombings, terrorist bombings, and the PLO killings at the Munich Olympic. Well, if I can just,
sure,
you can talk or you can let me talk. I mean, I'm trying to express something that's true, and I'm really getting tired, frankly, of progressives not having any willingness to open their hearts to a whole nother people's history that I think is really important. And it's this: there are 200 Christian majority nations in the entire world. There are 140 Muslim majority nations in the entire world. There is one Jewish majority nation in the entire world. One. And why? because 6 million of people of my faith, just because we pray from the Old Testament and not the New, were murdered. And my family came to America because they were escaping pogroms because they were being murdered.
Nobody denies that, Dean. The problem is that this has moved beyond religion and has basically moved into ethnicity. That is the problem, Dean. And then also, maybe religion is part of the problem. In this country, we have separation of church and state for a reason. For a reason. So, to me, I don't understand this type of logic that Dean is trying to use here, I guess as part of his defense or whatever. But the thing is, all you have to do is look at the history and look at what is happening today. Even before October 7th, when we were talking about this, what they were doing to the Palestinian people, they are trying to ethnically cleanse the land. So if they don't want them there, what does that tell you? That this is no longer just about religion. This is a problem.
And now Jewish people are being attacked because they're Jewish. There's one country, Briahna. I don't understand why progressives do not understand that we are the underdog too. We have been for world history. And I think it's high time, frankly. This is really important to me.
Yeah.
No, so I'm sorry. You know what was really frustrating to watch? To sit here and to listen to Dean talk about being attacked or being oppressed, and to say this to a Black woman. That's just what was killing to me. Because the reality is, Dean, when you're walking down the street, people see a white man. When I'm walking down the street, people see a Black woman. When Bree walks down the street, people see a Black woman. All that other stuff comes second. When I'm walking down the street, people don't know me. Nobody's looking at, oh, she got all these degrees. For people who don't know who Briahna Joy Gray is, and if she's a Black woman walking down the street, they're not like, oh yeah, there goes Briahna Joy Gray. She was a Harvard lawyer. They see you're Black first. So what pissed me off about this narrative from Dean is that in a sense, it was like he tried to make it seem like he's more of a victim in that she doesn't know what that feels like. I would argue she's more of a victim than he is because of the fact that Dean can walk down the street and people see a white man. There are certain things that Dean will never have to deal with living in this country that people like me and Bree do have to deal with. That's what pissed me off about the way that he was trying to come across like a victim here. This is not to say that things don't happen. This is not to say that people have not said hateful things and done hateful things to Jewish people. They have. But you are still at a level of privilege, Dean, that me and Bree will never see or never know simply because of the color of your skin. Never forget that.
Sure.
This is really important. I don't look like someone who needs any affection or support or protection, probably. I look like a white man, right? Well, let me tell you, people of my faith are being attacked, and they have been for world history, including 6 million of us killed in the Holocaust, including family members of mine, I'm sure, and pogroms that forced my family away. And now we're subject to sickening, vile anti-Semitism every day. One country. All we're saying is one country of the people of our faith to seek refuge in. And if you have one country that now combines millions of Palestinians, there's no more Jewish country in the world. And if America could have said, you know what? When the first boats left the Holocaust and came to this country, that we would have accepted them, maybe a different story. But Briahna, there is no place for Jewish people to go.
There's no place for Black people, Dean. This is the part that really kills me. There's no place for Black people, Dean. What are you talking about? If you get pulled by the cops, Dean, if you're pulled over by the cop, you don't have to worry about them taking your life during that traffic stop. You don't have to worry about driving off with your life. You know what I mean? You don't have to worry about those things, Dean. You don't have to worry about the fact if you're in a professional business, if you have a professional job, you don't have to worry about people assuming that you were a DIE hire instead of the fact that you were smart enough to get the position and you had the experience, Dean. You ain't got to worry about that. When you were in college, Dean, you didn't have to sit up there and worry about people wondering, oh, I wonder if he actually got in because he was smart or just because he was. I had to worry about that. I had to deal with those things. There's no safe place for Black people. Where's our safe place when police are killing unarmed Black people in the street and getting away with it? Where's our safe place, Dean? Where is it? You want to talk about how people have been treated? Let's talk about this, okay? You had over 400 years of slavery. My people built this damn country, and we still can't even get reparations. Think about that. They paid reparations to Japanese Americans that were part of the internment camps. They gave them cash reparations. Germany paid reparations to Jewish people, which I think they should have. But why are you making it seem like, like you are the one that is facing most of the oppression? My people ain't got shit. The government ain't never bent over backwards for us the way they've bent over for other people. This government bends over backwards for the state of Israel more than it bends over backwards for Americans in this damn country. Think about that. And definitely Black Americans. They never bent over backwards for us. You don't see them saying we need to pass this legislation to put this money into Black communities. You don't see them saying those things. But they want to give all this money to billions of dollars to Israel every year. Every year. They give us nothing. And for the people come to me and say, well, they gave the social programs and there's welfare. The majority of people on welfare are not Black. The majority of people on welfare are white. So that social program actually helps out white people more than it helps out Black people. Stop it with the noise. Stop it with the noise. You know who benefits from affirmative action the most, Dean? White women. Not Black women, not Black men, white women. They never did anything for us that didn't benefit white people in some way, shape, or form in return. So don't ever come there. Don't ever go there. This is just awful. This is horrible to me.
Just ask that you open your heart.
Yeah.
But let me just finish.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought you were
ask
finished.
you to open
Please.
your heart to what it's like to not look like someone who maybe needs some help. But let me tell you, speaking for millions of Jewish people around the world right now, I think it's really offensive that progressives have totally forgotten history and what the misery of being Jewish has been for generations and generations and generations for reasons that I do not really understand, but is real. So please, don't let that progressive love stop in my door. Well, okay.
I'll help you understand. For one, Representative Phillips, strikes me as a little ironic that you're going to say to me in my face as a Black American who doesn't have the option of someone that the United Nations and the international community having intervened on my behalf to create an entire country for my people who have zero options of some place to flee, who have been living in an apartheid state of our own in the United States of America, which has the 25% of the world's prison population that was disproportionately filled with my people, who was reported this week, substantively make all of the paint and slave labor products in the United States of America so we can compete with China and the rest of the world. The idea that you're looking at me and saying that I don't have empathy and can't open my heart to the psychic
I said
idea.
Progressive, Briahna, I do have empathy. That's what I'm asking for.
I am a progressive, so I'm speaking to you as a progressive, but also as a Black progressive. I have enormous empathy. Wait a minute. I have enormous empathy for the reasons why Jewish people want a Jewish state. I talk about this on the podcast a lot. There is a big part of me that says, oh, I get it, because I do not feel safe in the United States of America, not just me as an individual, but statistically as an aggregate. There's not a metric in the world that you can look at that says that this is a good place for Black Americans to be, that Black Americans are faring well in the United States of America. And I take your point, but it's also true that I know you and I are sitting here as two people who are not Christian in a predominantly Christian state. And there are Christians in America who make this very similar argument about America that it seems to me many people make about Israel, which is, oh, this is a Christian nation. And if immigration trends change and suddenly it does not become as much of a Christian nation, that we should rig the immigrant population to maintain the national character of the United States of America. We call that Christian nationalism, and we think that that's a bigoted principle and that we should not be picking and choosing who comes to this country to maintain some kind of ethnic or religious character that benefits the existing majority. We say, as Americans, we value pluralism and that every kind of person brings their own benefit and that we should protect the least of these and have laws that protect minorities because we value being a nation where minorities can be saved. Not that we have to rig the system so that we are majorities so that we can then dominate over the rest, right? So it strikes me as much as I empathize. When you tell the story of Jewish ships full of Jewish people after the Holocaust being turned away, I've spoken at length on this podcast about how disgusted I was to discover that Otto Frank, Anne Frank's father, application was turned away and how close they came to be able to immigrate to America. I'm disgusted by it. But the question is, why should the actions of an anti-Semitic America and an anti-Semitic Europe be paid for by the people of Palestine who had absolutely nothing to do with the horrors of the Holocaust?
And that is the gold money question. That's the question. Why should the Palestinians have to pay for that? See what I mean? Because when people make it this stuff like, yeah, I want a ceasefire, but we got to get rid of Hamas. And why haven't the Arab countries helped out the Palestinian people? They don't want to take them in. When people make those talking points, they're still demonizing the Palestinian people. So even if they say, like Dean says, I want this war to stop, I want this to end, even if they say that, and they're still saying those things about the Palestinian people, they still want you in your mind to see the Palestinian people as less than. And I don't know if that's something that's intentional from Dean or not, but you can't mix the two. Everybody should be treated the same. Why should Israel be put on a pedestal and the Palestinians are just seen as a group of people we just let live here and we tolerate? Why should it be this way? These people, Gaza didn't even have an army. So why is it okay for Israel to have all this power, all this control, and the Palestinian people are just supposed to sit there and tolerate it? Why is that okay?
I mean, Briahna, first, let me strike at the heart of what you just said earlier, which is my empathy for Black America and the long tail of slavery that is so abhorrent and so visible and so obvious that I cannot believe we have not repaired that injustice. I want to honor that and acknowledge that. If anything,
does he have reparations on his platform? Somebody look it up. Eric, look up his website and see if he got reparations on his platform. I forgot to do that since he mentioned repair.
I'm telling you, I empathize with that. I was asking for mutual empathy, and I don't know if you just shared it with me, but I think you did. But you just asked a question of something that is just it's just so historically inaccurate. Israel has been attacked because it's a Jewish state for decades. Now, Netanyahu's a different story. I'm not going to support him. What's happening right now is abhorrent, and his policies are abhorrent. It's true. And you can imagine it's not an easy thing to say for someone like me, but it is true. And I'm bold and I'm being honest and I understand. I cannot tolerate seeing this any longer. But Israel has been attacked since the day it was established by.
Listen to this, guys. I can't tolerate seeing this any longer, but Israel was the attacker first. They were attacking who was removed from the homes. Did the Palestinians remove Israelis from their homes and push them down into Gaza and fence them in? No, Israelis did that to the Palestinian people. So why is he trying to make it seem like the Palestinians are the ones that are in power and they are the ones that were oppressing Israelis?
The free world after the Holocaust. It was attacked by its neighbors. And they survived.
That's like saying that American settlers were attacked by Native Americans because they were white or because they were Christian.
Oh boy, Briahna, holy moly, boy! I'm telling you, I got to tell you, I'm expressing empathy for Palestinians, for Muslims, for Black Americans. I'm not feeling what I'm surprised, to be honest with you, and I'm offended.
What is the?
Now he's offended.
surprising about this, Representative?
I'm just surprised. I'm surprised by the lack. I just explained it. I'm surprised by the lack of empathy of progressives relative to the Jewish people and the state of Israel, not Benjamin Netanyahu.
What do you say, Dean Phillips, to the thousands and thousands of Jewish advocates for Palestinian rights who comprise organizations like If Not Now and Jewish Voice for Peace? And people like, frankly, Bernie Sanders, I think, could go a little farther. He still won't say the word ceasefire, but he was arguing in front of Congress to actually have us follow our own laws and limit aid based on the humanitarian actions of Israel. This is not a issue on which Jewish people are all on one side or the other. I had a Holocaust historian from Dartmouth on a couple of weeks ago talking about all of the different prongs of Zionism and how we have this revisionist history of what it means to be a Zionist, and how many Jewish thought leaders from Albert Einstein all the way down were highly critical of the Zionist project precisely because they saw it as replicating the harms that were done to Jews in Europe on a new population. And that never again was supposed to mean never again for anyone. We're not talking about a historical record where Jewish people just decided to immigrate to the land of Palestine and live alongside. There were Jews, Arab Jews, that lived in Palestine since time immemorial. That's not the question. In peace and prosperity. The question is whether or not a land grant from a colonial power like the UK can be given because of guilt, much well-earned guilt, frankly, over the anti-Semitism and a refusal to accept the victims and the survivors of the Holocaust, and to offload the issue onto another part of the world. And as I'm sure you're aware, there was a conversation about whether or not Israel should be located in Africa. But for various reasons, and I highly recommend people go back to listen to our episode with the Zionist historian of Zionism, it ended up being in Palestine. And so that is a kind of original sin that I see as very akin to
where the Jewish people originated. I mean, that's the whole point.
That's fine.
That's fine. That's the whole point. That's where.
So that gives you the ability to remove people from their homes. You know what I mean? So it's like the
Jewish people originated.
You cannot have there are Ukrainian Jews and Russian Jews and Polish Jews and French Jews and British Jews and Jewish people who have been living in Europe for centuries and decades, centuries and centuries. And on the other hand, you have Palestinians who are 80 years old, who are clutching the keys to the houses that they grew up in. They're on the other side of the wall, who have been told that they cannot go home because my Jewish friend who's born in Philadelphia gets to have a right of return, but they do not.
There you go.
Like that is the injustice that we're talking about here. If we're talking about moral weight and what was deserved after the Holocaust, you have my utmost sympathy. You have my utmost empathy. But the question isn't what is owed. It is what is owed from whom. And why is it that Europe gets to offload its own responsibilities? The Jewish state wasn't in Poland. I bet you a whole lot of people who had been chased out of their lands and put into concentration camps would have loved to feel safe in a land where they spoke the language and they had their own community and they had their own belongings and the like. But this is
the only reason they were living there, Briahna, is because they were forced there by the Tsar. It's hard to listen to, but go ahead. I'm just, I'm offended, but I'm listening.
And he wants to be president of the United States. This is the Zionist playbook, right? This is what they do. Once you start hitting them with historical facts, all of a sudden they're offended, or you're anti-Semitic, right? And it's always when you hit them with the historical facts. The reality is, I said this before too, in reference to Germany. Why didn't Germany make a home for Jewish people? Why didn't they? This is where all this started, right? That's where it started. So why didn't they do that? Why didn't they? And to Bree's point about they were looking at different countries in Africa as well, that goes to show you they were even open to the idea of countries in Africa, not necessarily Palestine.
I mean, that's fine. And we can all sit here and be offended. But the question now isn't really, and it's a moot point because in large part, Israel won this battle. They have established a country and nobody's...
you're you're attacking me in a funny way, because I'm telling you, I don't, what's so interesting is I'm not sure you heard what I said. I'm a Jewish man running for president of the United States of America.
Refuting is not attacking. I wouldn't say that she was attacking him, but see, again, this is Zionist playbook. I'm attacked. You attacked me. Oh, God.
Who wants to recognize the state of Palestine. I believe that we should invest in the state of Palestine. If I could just say what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to be a voice of decency, of compassion, of reason in the absence of it. And if you look at the other people running for president, Briahna, my goodness, I'm telling you, I'm appalled. I want this to end. It should have never started. And yes, Hamas is a horrific, despicable terrorist organization that needs to be eliminated. Benjamin Netanyahu should not be, I don't think, the prime minister of Israel moving forward. And I pray that Israelis make a change. Israel is the only multicultural, multi-faith, free country in the entire Middle East. As Richie Torres says, it's the only place where he as a gay man could be alive, let alone thrive. And look I'm trying to.
You know where he messed up, right? He's quoting Richie Torres. Sell out, AIPAC loving Richie Torres. Richie Torres, who takes thousands and thousands of dollars from the Israeli lobby. That's who he's quoting. Does he not realize people in Richie's district are not too happy with Richie Torres right now? Probably not the best person that you should be quoting. So he's like, let me pick out the LGBTQ guy who's Afro-Latino that has good things to say about Israel, Briahna. Let me pick him out. Does he not realize that Briahna knows exactly who Richie Torres is and that he is a horrible example? Horrible example.
I'm trying to be decent. Okay, Briahna, I'm trying to be compassionate and decent.
Gay marriage isn't legal in Israel.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Gay marriage is not legal in Israel. And interfaith marriage is not legal in Israel. People have to fly to Cyprus to get married if you want to marry a Christian or a Muslim or anybody else. I mean, like, let's just be honest about what we're doing here.
Entire Middle East. Okay.
I mean, let's just be the question. The reason we're
you notice now he has nothing to say in reference to that because they think people don't know this. They think people don't realize when people like Richie Torres says, well, I can go there and live freely as a gay man. You can't get married there, Richie. You can't get married there. And they think people don't know this, that people don't look this information up, right?
We're circling around. I appreciate that. Frankly, yes, you are, I think, closer to my politics than Joe Biden for sure. And that's what we're talking about in the Democratic primary.
Briahna, Briahna, I would love to continue the conversation. I was just notified actually that something serious just happened. I've got to.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'll let you go, but I just do want to get this out. My question was about why you don't support a one-state solution. That's why we're here, because the reality is that the elected officials.
First of all, I seriously have to go. Let me tell you this. I would love to have this conversation because I like to learn and I like to understand your perspective on it. I'd like to listen to others too. I'm not so hardened in my heart on anything that thoughtful perspectives from other people can't change my mind. I'd like to listen and learn to you. I have my own opinions. I do not mean to be antagonistic at all. In fact, I'm suffering like a lot of people right now. And by the way, I want to honor yours. Yeah. I gotta go.
He gotta go. So listen to this, okay? The one state solution, I'll tell you why he doesn't support it, because he wants a Jewish state. He wants that. Because the other option for one state would have it be a secular state, right? He wants a Jewish state. That is the thing. Why can't you have a one state where Jewish people and Palestinians live together? They have the same rights, they have equality, no one's encaged, that kind of thing. Why can't you have that? Why do people push back on that? Because they actually want a Jewish state. That's why they want that. I told you two-state solution is a moot point. There are too many settlements in the West Bank. It's a joke. It's a joke to say we need to move towards a two-state solution. So anyone still parroting that talking point, I tried to tell you guys over a year ago, that is not feasible at this point in time. Palestinian people want the right to return. And Israel doesn't want to give them that. But Dean, the way that he came across in this particular subject of the interview, painting himself as a victim, etc. Dean, you are a very wealthy individual. You're far better off than a lot of us. And it's not like you really had to struggle. Think about this. Economically, you didn't have to struggle. Financially, you come from a wealthy family. And you're a white guy. Yes, you're Jewish. But again, you are a white guy. You said so yourself. So you have been afforded many opportunities and advantages that me and Bree will never get just a pass on. We have to prove. This is the other thing I want people like Dean to understand. Dean doesn't have to walk into a room and prove that he's intelligent. He doesn't have to walk in a room and prove to people that he deserved to get the job that he got. He doesn't have to prove those things to people. He doesn't have to tell people that he went to college. People will just assume it and believe it. And just by looking at you, Dean, just by looking at you, you are a rich man. I will never be in your shoes. You will never be in my shoes. But what was interesting to me is that you actually thought by saying what you said to Briahna, that you actually have more to deal with than she does, as if she doesn't know what it's like to have to deal with these issues and more issues that you will never have to deal with. Very, very telling conversation. Not too long after this interview was published, Dean actually posted a video on his Twitter account saying that he actually just had to lay off staff members because they don't have enough money now for the campaign. Moving on. Thank you for the comment, Jurgen. Have you given Rashida Tlaib credit for urging voters to not vote for Biden? I'll be discussing that tomorrow, but this is the second time she's actually done this. This isn't the first time. The first time she did do it, I did, actually. Natalie says, why is Sabby on so early? I can never keep up with that time she's on. Yeah, so I'm on early today because I was supposed to do this stream yesterday, but I had some car issues, so that's why I'm doing it now. Plus today's holiday. ZG says Dean is irrelevant. He knew from the start that the primary was rigged. You're right. Thank you, Sam. He keeps saying that Israel is this bastion of Western values, and yet they have no issue euthanizing Ethiopian Jews. Total joke. Yeah, you're right. And that's not based on religion. They're Jewish too, right? Well, Dean, I don't think you were ready for that. I'm sorry. I don't think you were ready for that. We're moving on to our next story here. If you have not heard by now, Alexei Navalny actually died in prison. We're going to jump into that story and we're going to talk about who he actually was, which mainstream media is definitely leaving out of the discussion since he's passed away. Listen to this.
47-year-old Alexei Navalny was looking healthy, joking with a judge via video link from his Arctic prison just yesterday. Navalny's mother saw him Monday and said he was in good spirits. Yet somehow Alexei Navalny, Russian President Vladimir Putin's fiercest and most energetic critic, dropped dead suddenly at a penal colony in Siberia. Prison officials say Navalny went for a walk but felt unwell and quickly lost consciousness. They said medics could not revive him. President Biden blamed President Putin.
Make no mistake, Putin is responsible for Navalny's death.
Pause. So here we have the president, and he's not alone. Kamala Harris and others have said this as well. You're going to see saying that Vladimir Putin is responsible for Navalny's death. Now, they have no proof of this. This is what our elected officials do. They just say whatever they want. Mainstream media runs with that narrative from the State Department. They have no proof, no evidence, no proof that this is because of that Vladimir Putin was directly involved. Just like Joe Biden had no proof when he said he saw these pictures of these beheaded babies, which he never saw.
Supporters laid flowers to honor Navalny, despite a warning from the state prosecutor that protests would not be allowed. When a woman tried to unfurl a sign, she was taken away by authorities. Navalny started out as an anti-corruption blogger, exposing on his YouTube show the lavish lifestyles enjoyed by Putin and his inner circle. Navalny was a central figure in massive protests against Putin in 2012. He was jailed and harassed and attacked with a green dye that damaged his right eye. In 2020, while on a flight in Moscow, Navalny suddenly fell ill. He was poisoned by a nerve agent and flown to Germany to recover. He blamed Putin for the assassination attempt. The Kremlin denied responsibility. And then came the most consequential decision of his life. Navalny returned to Russia after recovering from his poisoning. He deliberately put his life on the line and his principles first, until his death today, which is not confirmed by his family, but who don't seem to doubt it. Navalny's wife, Yulia, in Munich, called for President Putin to be punished. We should come.
She just happened to be there. You guys notice this? His wife just happened to be at the Munich security conference.
Together and fight against this evil, she said. In 2021, President Biden warned Putin of devastating consequences if anything happened to Navalny in Russian custody. NBC's Peter Alexander pressed him on that today.
What consequences should he and Russia face?
That was 3 years ago. In the meantime, they faced a hell of a lot of consequences, and we're contemplating what else could be done.
Richard, what is the Kremlin saying about all this tonight?
Well, the Kremlin is calling Western accusations unacceptable and says it doesn't yet know how Navalny died. But critics point out that many of Putin's opponents have died just like this, mysteriously, either falling out of windows or poisoned, or in this case, dropping dead in jail.
Thanks for watching.
Okay. So that is the story about Navalny that they want you to know, right? But there's some things about him that are purposely left out. And I'm meaning, even if you look at his Wikipedia page, you're not going to see the things that I'm about to show you. But it wasn't just Joe Biden. It was also Kamala Harris. Now, when you watch this, I want to remind you of something. Gonzalo Lira died in a Ukrainian prison, correct? That was fairly recent. Notice you did not see Kamala or Joe Biden or all these other elected officials come out and show their sympathy for Gonzalo Lira. And that's because he died in a Ukrainian prison. And if you acknowledge that, then you have to acknowledge that Zelensky may have killed him, just like they're acknowledging that they're saying that Putin killed Navalny. If it were with Gonzalo Lira, if they acknowledge that, then they would have to say that Zelensky killed Gonzalo Lira. That wouldn't look good for the United States, because then you have to justify to the American people why you sending all this money to Ukraine. And that would not look too good for you, right? So pay attention to these things, guys. Now, Kamala Harris comes in as well. Here comes the sympathy card from Kamala.
Before I begin today, we've all just received reports that Alexei Navalny has died in Russia. This is, of course, terrible news, which we are working to confirm. My prayers are with his family, including his wife, Yulia, who is with us today. And if confirmed, this would be a further sign of Putin's brutality. Whatever story they tell, let us be clear, Russia is responsible. And we will have more to say on this later.
Did you hear what she said there at the end? She said, whatever story they tell. That's kind of like a little signal there, right? From maybe other media networks, those of us that do independent media, kind of a warning to the American people. What other story that you hear, FYI, we're letting you know that Russia is responsible. Now, more Americans need to be, I think, more aware. Again, where was this statement here from Kamala in reference to Gonzalo Lira? And look at where she is located, ladies and gentlemen. The Munich Security Conference. You mean the same Munich Security Conference that Alexei's wife just spoke at? So you see, they were there together. Alexei's wife just happened to be there while Kamala's there. You think that's a coincidence? Because I don't. Now, we're going to dig a little bit deeper here, because I want to tell you what they're not telling you about Alexei. Number one, this guy was a CIA asset. This guy was also a freaking nationalist. This guy was a Nazi. They don't tell you any of this information. None of this. We'll start with the CIA part. Let's bring this up. So, thank you, Brian, for sharing this. Alexei Navalny was a U.S. government-funded agitator. Obituaries include his founding of an organization called Democratic Alternative, or DA. WikiLeaks confirms DA received money from the U.S. government through the National Endowment for Democracy. And you can see this here, actually. It says right here, in 2000, he joined the United Democratic Party, known as Yabloko, under its leader, Grigory. The party stood for liberal and social democratic values. Navalny gained an economics degree at the Financial University, 2001, and from 2004 to 2007 served as chief of staff of the Moscow branch of Yabloko. A charismatic speaker, he was attracted by the concept of television debates, and in 2005 founded a social movement for young people with the name taken from the Russian word for yes, DA, Democratic Alternative, which was active in the media. Now we have more receipts here. And here's the connection. Thank you, Angelo. Navalny CIA connection. Cable from WikiLeaks about funding the NED CIA of the party that Navalny created in 2005, Democratic Alternative. So it says here, Democratic Alternative, Maria Gaidar, daughter of former Prime Minister Yegar Gaidar, leads Democratic Alternative. She is ardent in her promotion of democracy, but realistic about the obstacles she faces. Gaidar said that DA is focused on nonpartisan activities designed to raise political awareness. She has received funding from the National Endowment for Democracy, a fact she does not publicize for fear of appearing compromised by an American connection. Wonder why? Goes on to say here, she told us that DA was a compliment to Briahna, not a competitor, and is an effort to widen the democratic base. People who would want to join Briahna would not want to join DA and vice versa, but we work together for a common goal. Gaidar told us that DA was more a forum for open discussion than a political movement. She has organized a series of debates among people with controversial viewpoints. She is also planning to hold a summer camp in 2007 to train up to 2,000 students in the ways of democratic activism. And you can see here's that paper trail here, what I just read to you there. So that's important for people to see. So you had this guy who basically, Alexei here, this guy was basically working for the CIA, or he's a CIA asset. So you guys know how I feel about these alphabet letter agencies. You know, these are not good things. So keep that in mind. So that's important. Notice Kamala's not going to mention that. Biden's not going to mention that. You know, these things are kind of like kept under wraps, so to speak. You have to dig for this type of information, but that piece is left out. And there's more. Come up here. There's the nationalist issue. This is the one I would think more people would have been aware of. Now, Al Jazeera actually called this out a while back. They called this out in 2001 when they said, has Alexei Navalny moved on from his nationalist past? So the Kremlin's greatest critic stopped attending far-right rallies many years ago, but he still supports anti-migrant measures. Let's go on here. We already know that part, so we're just going to try to dive down here. Here we go. Muslim cockroaches. I'm going to show you this. You'll see it yourself. In a 2007 pro-gun rights video, Navalny presents himself as a certified nationalist who wants to exterminate flies and cockroaches, while bearded Muslim men appear in cutaways. So you see, so for those of us that are advocating for some type of self-determination for the Palestinian people, and we're advocating for like BDS and all that type of stuff, and those of us who are not xenophobic, this guy was. And this is just wait till you see the commercial, because this is just the beginning. He whips out a gun and shoots an actor wearing a keffiyeh who tried to attack him. Like, no kid. No kid, you guys. Now think about it. All of us that have attended the pro-Palestinian protests and marches, this is not someone that we should be, shouting out or applaud. In my opinion, I would not be doing that. This is who this guy really was. It goes on to talk about the video. Shortly before releasing the video, Navalny was kicked out of Yabloko, Russia's oldest liberal democratic party, for his nationalist views and participation in the Russian March, an annual rally of thousands of far-right nationalists, monarchists, and white supremacists. So this is why I wanted to make sure that I covered this story, because the same people like Joe Biden and Kamala, people like Nancy Pelosi, the people who will kneel with kente cloth when something happens to a Black person in this country, instead of giving you any type of real concessions, those same people are praising this man, a nationalist, a white supremacist. It goes on to say, a veteran human rights advocate recalled falling out of Navalny over his views at the time, when he told me that the future in Russia belongs only to the nationalist Russian political process. And I said, okay, lad, we are not talking anymore. That was Lev Ponomarov, who heads the Moscow-based For Human Rights group and is blacklisted by the Kremlin as a foreign agent. The participants of the Russian marches rallied against the influx of labor migrants from ex-Soviet Central Asia and Russia's most Muslim northern Caucasus region. Some protesters sported closely cropped their hair and raised their hands in a Nazi salute. So this is why this is important. So for the people defending this guy, I'm like, what? Are you serious? No. It goes on to say, in late 2000 saw a peak of nationalism in post-Soviet Russia. So they were talking about the increase there. It says some Russians reeling from 2 wars in Chechnya responded with xenophobia. Far-right nationalist groups mushroomed, and some resorted to violence. So that's who this guy is. And that is important for people to know. Now, some of the same people who said to me over a year ago that we should not be participating in a Medicare for All march with some people who are conservative, some of those same people are making excuses for this guy. Ellie, really? Now there's more. Because you'll see here, Z Squirrel, you guys should follow this account. Z Squirrel even pointed it out. Navalny, the far-right Russian Nazi sympathizer who made election campaign videos where he depicted Muslims as cockroaches and pulled out a gun to shoot them, has been pronounced dead. Now watch the Western media class turn him into their brave, heroic, martyr saint. And that's exactly what they've been doing. So you'll see here, right? Financial Times had called this out. Right here, defiantly, he recorded a pro-gun rights video in which he compared people from Russia's most Muslim North Caucasus to cockroaches and mimicked shooting one with a pistol. Like this is, I can't make this up. You know, it says here, Navalny's more nationalist views are troubling. Last year, he spoke at Rusky Marsh, where some protesters made Nazi salutes. He has also endorsed a movement called Enough of Feeding the Caucus, which protests against the theft of the state funding, which critics see as xenophobic. And a video Navalny recorded for Narod several years ago called for the arming of the population to shoot Chechen bandits. This is who Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and all them out here are sympathizing for. It goes on to say here, he co-founded the nationalist group Narod. Their manifesto, an admixture of what Navalny calls democratic nationalism, includes calls for democratic control of the state, along with volkish precepts like ending the degradation of Russian civilization, restoring the organic unity of the Russian past, present, and future. And every Russian must have the right to receive Russian citizenship and the possibility to return to the motherland. Now, here's that commercial. And you tell me what you think. And Z Squirrel actually was able to find one with the English translation. Listen to this.
Здравствуйте. Сегодня мы поговорим о борьбе с насекомыми.
He says, today we talk about insect control.
Никто из нас не застрахован от того, что в наш дом заползет
No house is safe from cockroach infestation.
таракан. Фу. Ну или в форточку залетит.
Ew, or a fly gets in through an open window.
Все мы знаем, что от мух отлично помогает.
We all know the cure against flies, a fly swatter, a slipper against a roach.
Мухобойка, а от тараканов тапка. Но что делать, если таракан окажется?
But what to do if cockroaches are too big and flies are too aggressive? So if you look at the picture back here, pay attention to that picture, right? Like, this is bad. Listen to this.
Слишком велик, а муха не в меру агрессивна.
And this is the part that they kind of cut. Let me see if I can get it here. But you see this? So this is, it's kind of hard to see it on here. But anyway, this is a Muslim guy or a guy pretending dressed up as a Muslim with the keffiyeh, and he's calling that the cockroach. So when he said that the cockroach is too big or whatever, he was talking about the Muslim people. So they had this guy come in, and then he's supposed to, basically he shoots them or whatever, basically getting rid of what he calls the cockroach. And then let me come back here.
Ну а в этом случае я рекомендую.
You see this? In such cases, I recommend. This is a problem. That's a good question. Extreme said, now, why would he even do a video like this? Good question. So you guys see the problem? Okay. So we just supposed to pretend, think about it, guys, follow the money. Think about it. The same government that is funding Israel, that does not want to call for the ceasefire. That's the US government, the same government that's funding Israel, but is giving lip service to us and telling us that we got to protect the Palestinian people as much as possible. Those same people, Kamala and Biden, are out there basically praising this guy who hated Muslims, who was calling them cockroaches and pretending to shoot one in a commercial. So do you see the connection? They're perfectly fine with the xenophobia. This is what I'm trying to tell you guys. Whether it's the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, when it comes to protecting the state of Israel, they're not as upset or bothered by the xenophobia as they claim to be. This is one of the reasons why they're coming after Rashida Tlaib, because Rashida is Palestinian. She's the only one in the house. And she said, no, you guys are like, you're killing my people. Notice how, again, what did they do? They censured Rashida Tlaib. You didn't see Kamala, Biden, Pelosi, none of them. You didn't see them come to Rashida Tlaib's support. No, because they funding Israel, and a lot of them take money from the Israeli lobby. So at the end of the day, what I'm trying to tell you is, whether it's Republican or Democrat, neither one of these parties really cares as much about the xenophobia as they claim, if it is Muslim people. Pay attention to that. There's also claims that people are protesting about this guy's death. So this guy posted this video. Thank you, Hotspot. American man in Moscow Russia shows that there are no protests over Navalny's death like mainstream media is reporting. So this is just another thing that they're lying about. Look at this.
So as you can see, there are no mass protests anywhere. There's hardly anybody out here. There's maybe, I don't know, 20, 30 people, most of them being media on the opposite side. That's where the Navalny shrine is. People ask me all the time, do you ever have any issues in Russia? Up until tonight, no. But Navalny supporters clearly don't like me. Why would they like a man who came from America to speak out against the West backing Navalny? Well, that just irks them in a certain way. So they decided tonight that they weren't going to put up with my shenanigans and they were going to try to tell me off. They made some false accusations and it was dealt with swiftly. Misinformation doesn't equal factual information. So there you go. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, all of them telling you that there's mass panic and protests and riots. It's untrue. Beautiful Moscow, Russia, in peace.
So you guys see this? You see how they just lie? They just tell you anything. Oh, there's hundreds of people out there protesting. Really? Really? Now, we always have to question the State Department. I keep telling you guys, be careful with the State Department talking points. Now, some people got some criticism. Julian Assange's wife being one of them, Cornel West being another, because they sent their condolences to Alexei's family. Listen to this. So this is Stella Assange. This is Julian Assange's wife. Utterly devastating news. Navalny has died in prison. He was only 47. He had not been in prison, or had he not been in prison, he would be alive. Navalny was an opposition figure, but his investigative journalism exposed the corruption of ruling elites in Russia. Navalny had recently been moved to a remote penal colony in Russian Arctic. I feel for his wife, Yulia, and their two children who will probably never really know what happened. Condolences to his friends and family. And so two things can be true at the same time. Yes, he was an opposition figure to Vladimir Putin. Yes, that is true. But it's also true. Yes, he exposed corruption. Yes. But it's also true this guy was a nationalist and that this guy was a CIA asset. And so in the comments section, like I said, it started with hers first. I said he was a Nazi and a CIA asset. Just look at the comments, guys. DD Geopolitics. Navalny supported the people that imprisoned your husband. You've lost the plot. Gail Scott. Sorry, Stella, but you got this wrong. Navalny was part of the corruption and not anywhere in the same league as Julian. The fact that he will be touted in the news as a hero while Julian is not should tell you that. And where's the one from? There's one from Margaret Kimberly. I want to make sure I get to that one. Lowe says, Stella, you expressing sympathy for a literal Nazi does not serve Julian any good. And so this is coming from Danny Haifong's video, where again, it says Putin derangement syndrome is when you mourn a literal Nazi in Alexei Navalny while ignoring Julian Assange being tortured for doing journalism. So you guys you see the difference? Notice how you don't see them have the same type of sympathy for Julian Assange because Julian Assange revealed the US war crimes. That's why, right? So the comments, and I was trying to find the reply from Margaret Kimberly, but I don't see it now. I don't know what happened. Maybe there's too many comments now. I should have put it in a separate thing. But yeah, people, those are just some of the comments. And then there's the one from Cornel West. Now, a lot of people have already covered this, so I'm not going to go too deep, but I'll tell you my thoughts on this. Dr. West said, my prayers are with the precarious. I don't know why I can't read today. I'm sorry, you guys. My prayers are with the precious. I said Perkesis. My prayers are with the precious family of the courageous Russian political prisoner and late Alexei Navalny, just as I pray for my dear brothers Mumia Abul Jamal, Imam Jamil Abdullah, Leonard Peltier, and sister Nergis Mohammadi, and all other political prisoners in the U.S. and the world. Free all political prisoners under cruel and unjust systems of oppression. And so here's the picture here. So you'll see there's Navalny, there's Mumia, and here's all the others, right? So here's the thing. I think that Dr. West may have gotten the impression that people wanted him to be happy that someone was killed, but based on what I've heard from the response. And I, for one, am not saying anyone deserves to die. Okay. I don't think anyone deserves to be killed or murdered. I'm not that. That's not me. I'm not, for one, that way. I can't speak for everybody else, but where I took issue with this is the fact that Navalny is here paired right next to Mumia and people like Leonard Peltier. He's put in this box with them. And these are people that he would want nothing else better to do than to see their demise, simply because of the color of their skin. This is the same guy who's pretending to shoot Palestinian people in a commercial, called Muslim people cockroaches. So, and there's more. There's more. There's some things I can't show you on here. And that was my criticism. So when I responded to Dr. West, I said just that, like, this guy was a Nazi. Like, why are you putting him with these people? And I guess Dr. West saw it as though, well, they were all like political prisoners, that kind of thing. Right. But the thing is this. We have to be careful about who we lump in with who, right? And I think that for me, it's like, this guy was an actual white supremacist. An actual white supremacist. So this is not to say that you have to be angry, or excuse me, this is not to say that you have to be happy that he was killed or however he died. We're not saying you got to be happy about that. But what I am saying is, I'm not giving him a shout out. Does that make sense? Like, I'm not giving Nazi shout outs. That's my thing. And I would not put him with Mumia and Leonard Peltier. I interviewed the Peltier kids. I don't know if you guys saw that interview, but I interviewed Leonard Peltier. They call themselves the Peltier kids. I interviewed 2 members of his family on the show. And so for me, I would not put him with these people. And some people, saw this and they were just like, what is happening here? Like, what is happening? And it's like, especially if you're running on a message of, peace and those types of things. And if you say, like, you also want to fight back against white supremacy, which Dr. West has said on this show and others, well, then probably not good to be giving shout out to a Nazi. Because some people will see this and just be like, okay, whatever, because they don't really know a lot about this guy. But some people definitely saw this and was like, what is happening here? Right. So I think that piece is important. And I sincerely hope, I hope Dr. West takes that to heart. I hope Stella takes it to heart. Like, I'm not shouting out CIA assets and Nazis. Like, I'm just not, period. So I hope that they can take that to heart. But it's true. This is the same guy who was basically getting paid from the same organization that is responsible for putting Julian Assange in prison in the first place. So no, his situation is nowhere near the same level as compared to Mumia, what happened to Mumia and what happened to Leonard Peltier. That's how I see it. But I would not put a Nazi next to with these people. Eric's going to come in and link this to money and demands, and then we'll go to the next story.
Hey, yeah. So Yeah, we're certainly seeing this latest further fragmentation of the left, right? And it's I think what I'm trying to what I wanted to connect it to is the money and demands, and basically to the idea that if whenever we're talking about these things or pointing things out, if we make those connections to like, why are these things happening, right? Did we have this war, or this, this Russian invasion war in Ukraine? Why are all these bombs being dropped in Gaza? And what I'm saying is we always need to connect it to the money and the corruption. Every bomb that's dropped in Gaza is money for the MIC, military industrial complex. The reason we had this conflict in Ukraine is because it makes money for those interests. It's all about war, and war tensions are profitable. And of course the war tensions with Russia is profitable. And so then, that's, if we don't identify that as the driving force, then how are we going to fix it, is what I'm getting at. And so we have this whole Congress and executive branch that's bought off by these same interests that want these wars, that want these war tensions. And so we need to make those connections to the corruption. And so what I'm proposing, what I'm trying to say is that every time these things come up, we need to make those connections. And the way I like to frame it is MCDS, money, corruption, demand, solutions, and then get to the demands part. And I feel like most of the time it doesn't even get to the corruption part, and then also to the demands part. So what's our demands? Our demand is to end the corruption, to end the way that this government serves these interests, these big money interests, and not ours. And when you get to that, then you look at, okay, what are the solutions? And then you can really be getting somewhere. And so, so from the campaigns and from most of the commentary out there, I guess I'm making a humble challenge to try to always bring it to that, to the corruption, the demands, and the solutions. And so this connects into that, because Navalny as a hero is just, the reason that's being done is because it's an attack on Putin and part of that whole war tensions. And so if all a commentator or a candidate does is play into that, then they're not getting to the demands and the solutions. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Well said. Thank you so much, Eric. And one other thing I want to add, people, for you to just think about: if the president and the vice president and the State Department are shouting out this guy, chances are probably not someone it might be someone you need to look into. Put it that way. Notice they didn't do this for Gonzalo Lira. Right? Like I said, because he died in Ukrainian prison, and that means they would have to try to hold Zelensky accountable, and that's mess up their money train, because they got to have excuses to keep sending him this money and sending him weapons. So pay attention to who they acknowledge and who they don't acknowledge. All right, let's go to some of the comments here and we'll get to the next story. Lawrence said, I think if Putin wanted him dead, he would have been dead a long time ago. That's a good point, Lawrence. Thank you for the super chat. Timbo, Julian Assange is in prison dying. So hypocritical. Exactly. Like I said, notice who they don't shout out. Thank you, L Rock and Rolla. I would give Bree my whole heart and spiritual worship for her before even God if she was my GF, on the condition that she never, ever, ever ties her hair back tight or in braids again. Oh, L, those are a lot of demands. Thank you, Akiko. Thank you for highlighting. Thank you for highlighting all BS and educating me with facts. Thank you so much for that. Thank you, Cassie. People out here support Navalny's free speech, but got nothing to say about Assange. Yeah. Thank you so much for the super sticker, greatly blessed. Thank you for the super chat, Sparky. Denazify Israel. Thank you for the super sticker, Yantra Mandala. And thank you for the super chat, Sparky. Every time anyone says that Israel is our only friend in the Middle East, I can't help but think that before Israel, we had no enemies in the Middle East. John Sheehan, U.S. missionary. Interesting. And thank you for this as well. Navalny was the Juan Guaido of Russia. He was 100% a puppet of the West. He was always sickly and may have been knocked off by the West to offset any positive vibes Putin got from the Tucker interview. That was another thing I mentioned. Don't you think it's kind of strange that all this happened after Tucker had that interview with Vladimir Putin? Thank you, Christian. How come Kamala ain't standing up for my beautiful FBA and ADOS brothers and sisters to get their reparation checks? Got me hyped up. Stop playing with us. Calm. Oh, she's not going to do that. And thank you for the super chat, Sparky. It's ridiculous to call Navalny Putin's opposition as if he had any support at all in Russia. Most Russians never heard of him. Interesting. I'll take the comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin hemp car. It's always a coincidence when it happens here, but never over there. Hugo, Dilma, Morales, Geronimo Pratt, the godfather of Tupac, Bob Marley, Judy Berry, all got cancer. Schwartz, Gene Seberg, Hemingway, Gary Webb. Then, of course, Hastings' strange car crash like Anne H. style. He was a NED stooge, I'm sure, like, I'm not going to say it on here. I'm sure like P. Riot, who were crushing in churches and not leaving, like it or leave it, few left. And thank you for this tip as well. If Navalny didn't like Russia, why didn't he leave? Upset because his rich family couldn't make a few dollars more from the USA investment. Where are dissidents of imperialism to go when the USA has a presence in almost every nation, and the few they don't are sanctioned, and people die from a lack of treatment and times with little food and supplies? I'd rather resist and sacrifice with my comrades than live here. And thank you for this tip, Roger. Him being poisoned, how do we know it wasn't the CIA? Just like they thought of blowing up ships of Cubans fleeing Cuba to the US to turn around and blame it on Fidel for them leaving Cuba. I mean, the reason for the CIA poisoning could be he pissed them off, like no longer willing to play ball. Here's Dean's site. Go to Equity and Restorative Justice. No reparations, only intentions. And that's what I figured. And thank you for this as well. Woodrow Wilson is another person who was good on progressivism, but bad on issues of race. He was antitrust, pro-worker, reining in the banks, but made sure that Black people were shut out. Eric, I want to attack it a different way. I don't see the hammer, AKA money, as the problem. I see where the money is sourced from as the problem. I'd rather replace corporate money with co-op money, more democratic. Thank you for that. We're moving on to this story of Bassem and Chris Cuomo interview. It's interesting. So Chris Cuomo, he is one of the hosts on News Nation. You guys know he came from CNN, got fired from CNN because of sexual harassment and all that jazz. Interesting how he's able to just pick back up like that and get a job again. Interesting. He actually has another project that he's a part of called the Chris Cuomo Project. And he interviews guests on that platform. And he recently interviewed Bassem Yousef about the Middle East turmoil. And I really want to dive into this conversation. There are two parts I want to focus on for this discussion, because Bassem, he's a comedian, he's funny, but he gets it, right? He gets history. He understands what's happening to the Palestinian people. But what I want you to focus on is Chris Cuomo's responses, and I'll tell you why, because there's something that I've started to notice. Let's dive in at this point here.
Because there's a lot of the pro-Zionists are on the left, big time. There's a lot of people who, like Joe Biden, he's a Democrat, and people are asking him just ceasefire. And a lot of people who are on the bankroll of AIPAC are actually Democrats. So it's not really a left-to-right thing. Yes.
Well, everybody was pro-Israel in America. Both parties, the leaders, the money, the influence was too great for anybody to abandon it. But don't you think that the right kind of edged ahead even before this most recent conflict, moving the consulate to Jerusalem and Trump being so much more of a vocal BB ally and much more so than Biden, certainly as a vestige of the Obama administration? It seems now that if you were to point to one of the two parties and say, which one is more pro-Israel, people would say the GOP, not the Democrats.
Absolutely.
Pause. So I want to show you something I noticed about Chris Cuomo. You know what he just did there? He just admitted to Bassem and everyone else who saw this interview that he knows the reason why our politicians are supporting Israel is because of the money. What did he say? The money's just too good there. Both parties supported the Israeli lobby. Problem that I have is that he just stated that on this show, but he'll appear on News Nation and he'll still give pro-Israel talking points and pretend like all of a sudden this conversation didn't happen. All of a sudden he'll pretend like, oh, what do you mean the Israeli lobby? All of a sudden, all that just goes out the window when he comes back onto News Nation. And that's something I have noticed particularly with him. And that tells you that Chris knows exactly what's going on. He's very much aware. Chris is acting. When you see him on News Nation, Chris is acting. It's all an act. He just admitted to him he knows about the money, the lobby. Let's continue.
But there's two things. Number one, there's something about a little bit of a hypocritical side of how the GOP deals this, because most of the pro-Israel, pro-Zionist are anti-Semites. It's crazy.
You really believe they're anti-Semites?
Who can forget MTG, like about it, like the whole like Jewish laser guns. A lot of people pro GOP will go out and say Jews will not replace us in Charlottesville. So there's this crazy split, and Netanyahu is friends of all of those people, the pro-Zionists, but they're very anti-Semite. They hate the Jews and they love Israel. And you know what they do that, right? It's only because of the rapture, the second coming of Jesus. They are like. When we talk about Zionism, I don't even think about Jewish people, because most of the Jewish people are actually on our side. Jewish Voices for Peace. There's Bernie Sanders. All of it. It's not a Jewish thing. It is a Zionist thing. Most Zionist people are actually Christian Zionists. And
pause. That piece right there is very important. Now, if I was him, I wouldn't have mentioned Bernie Sanders is on our side, because he's not. In fact, in a recent interview, Bernie Sanders will not admit that a genocide is taking place in Palestine. Actually, I think Bree shared that on Twitter earlier today. He won't admit that, and Bernie Sanders still won't call for a ceasefire. So I wouldn't have added Bernie Sanders in the mix of all of that. But he's right. If you actually look at the numbers, for the most part, most of the Jewish people, I can say at least in America, are actually on our side, on the side of the pro-Palestinian protests and rallies and the pro-Palestinian stance and position. And that is also the reason why a lot of the Zionists are very nervous, and they're trying to smear people and dox people. They tried to dox those students at Harvard. They're trying to dox presidents of universities and all those things, because they realize they're losing control of the narrative. Just like when Biden had that conversation with Netanyahu and said Israel is losing support, they're starting to lose control of the narrative. So just keep that in mind. That's why they're trying to do everything they can. Like the story about, they said the women were assaulted. They had no evidence, no forensics, nothing. But a story was just confirmed by the UN earlier today. I put it on Twitter that they have actual credible sources that show that Palestinian women have been sexually assaulted. But there's no outrage coming from the Hillarys or the Biden or Kamala, or even like the people on the right as well. There's no outrage in reference to that. So what you see again is that once again, our politicians actually do not represent the American people. They represent their donor interest.
And they're pushing the whole world for a brink because of this. There's like this book called Forcing God's Hands. Incredible book. It was written in 1998. And they're talking about the dispensationalists and how they basically made it a self-professing prophecy. And those people who believe in the second rapture, they believe that all Jews will be killed and only 144,000 people will remain, and they're all going to follow Christ.
Yep.
It is dogmatic and it's crazy in a country that is liberal and secular than the United States. So I talk about a lot to people in the Democratic Party, and they are very upset about the leadership, which is Biden, and how and Secretary Blinken, which is like a disgrace. Yeah, I mean, we're gonna get to that like later, but it is yes, it is about part of it's right and left. But now, as much as I'm one of those people, I would vote blue no matter who. I will never give my voice to Biden after what he's done.
So then what do you do? If you're blue no matter who, and the who is Biden and you won't vote for him, what do you do?
I would sit that one out, seriously. And it's crazy because I became an American citizen in this country, and I'm so happy to vote. And it took America 4 years to get checked out of the elections.
So let's think about this for a second, guys. And this is what I said, right? Like that a lot of people will vote the couch. A lot of people will vote couch 2024. So he's letting you know, he said no. And I guess he was one of those people that was like a vote blue no matter who. But he's like, nah, this is a bridge too far for me.
Because if you are continue supporting a daily killing there, and you're not even like wanting to put the slightest effect to stop the killing, why would I vote for you? And then they come back and they blackmail us. It's like, but yes. Reproductive rights. At least if a woman in Tennessee cannot have reproductive, she can travel to California, New York to do it. Those people in Gaza have nowhere to go.
Blackmail. I love the fact that he referred to it as blackmail. They come back and they blackmail us. It's true. It's like for the people who are telling me, well, if you don't vote for Biden, what are you going to do? I was like, I could vote third party or independent. Oh, but that's helping Donald Trump. I'm like, well, I'm not voting for someone who's supporting and funding a genocide. 2, I'm not voting for the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. I left the 2-party system. Oh, well, you're just handing it to Donald Trump. Then if you come back and say, okay, I'll just vote the couch and I'll just sit at home. Oh, no, you're still just handing it to Donald Trump. So what they want you to do is they want you to overlook the genocide and just put that to the side. And they want you to still go out there and support Joe Biden anyway, because they're afraid of Orange Man. And now when you think about this, how does the Democratic Party, how do they, push against you in reference to that situation if you don't want to vote for Joe Biden? Then they start to use the abortion issue, which they have held on to this card for years. Barack Obama didn't codify Roe v. Wade. He said he would do that, never did. They had many years to codify Roe v. Wade, but they held on to that card in the event they needed it later. Now's that time. So now they're telling people, women, if you want to protect your reproductive rights, you need to go out and vote for Joe Biden so that he can get this fixed. Otherwise, if you vote for Trump, abortion is going to be outlawed in the United States. Now, listen to this. When you are told that statement, this is how you push back. Biden could have done that his first year. If they really cared about your reproductive rights, Biden could have done that his first year. They could still try to do that now. So you see what he means by they blackmail you? You're going to lose all your reproductive rights if you don't come out and support Joe Biden. Crazy, isn't it?
So and it's always been like the Democratic Party blaming the minorities because the Democratic Party gave us the promise that we are on your side. But in reality, they are not, because here you have a war, 27,000 kids, 27,000 Palestinians killed, 100,000 being injured, 70% of the homes. You did this show with Abdul Jabbar, the father, and you gave him the space, and I really appreciate and this guy is an American citizen. He's not even in Gaza, and his son was killed for throwing, and he's not even throw the stone. And even if he threw a stone, he should not be killed. So
we don't know that he threw any stones.
But even if he did, does he deserve to get shot?
No, he doesn't. But this is important, right? So Palestinian American, right? Now, why is this important in reference to those of us that live in the U.S.? How is that any different from the way that police treat unarmed Black people here in the United States? So this kid, they say that he threw a rock. So that was a death sentence for him. No arrest, no trial, no sentencing, just an automatic death sentence. Now, where did the American police get that from? They get it from the IDF, because the IDF trains police here in the United States, in particular, the NYPD. So think about that when you see some of the tactics that our police use in this country and you compare it to what's happening with the IDF in Israel.
Oh, no. That should be simple. No. But I don't like the suggestion, not from you, but the father even put it out there that, they say he threw rocks. Look, the fact scenario doesn't make any sense. The lack of investigation, the things that he told me they said to him when they came to the house. He wanted his son's personal effects. He says one of the soldiers threw the wallet on the ground and said, go ahead, reach for it, and I'll send you the same place I sent your son. Mm-hmm. Now, he's probably lying. Well, why? This is his son. The guy's an American. He's not anti-America. He is American. I think that it's so easy for people. If I were to look at how people blame me for things, you're an IDF shill. You hate the Jews. It goes back and forth because we're in a place now where if I'm not agreeing with you all the time, I'm your enemy. And so many things, you use the word nuance. Yes, complex situations. If the Middle East isn't complex, what is? There's never a single factor explanation. Here's a thing I've been thinking about lately on this.
There's that word again, complex. No, it is not complex, guys. We have to push back against that as well. And we have to push back about who they consider to be a Semite, right? Because I told you before, if you look at the definition, Palestinians are also Semites. This is not something that is just unique to Jewish people, right? So this complex, statement that they give you, right? What do you mean when it's complex? That's just a way for you to say, well, I don't really have time to discuss it. I don't want to really dive into it, but it's not complex. I've explained this to you multiple times. We've explained the history on this show. You could probably find a TikTok video, which will explain it to you in 2 minutes. So it's not complex. That is a scapegoat. That's a way to get out of focusing on what Israel has truly done. And so when people throw in that word, it's complex. We can't really talk about it. It's too complicated. It's not complicated.
But I don't want to lose my point, which is, don't you need a platform? I know you're doing shows, Bassem's all over the country doing his comedy, which is a great act. You can watch, like I do online, you can find clips all over the place of Bassem Yousef, but...
Yeah, and you coming to my show in New Jersey?
No way, I don't go to New Jersey.
Yeah, he don't go to New Jersey. I don't know what that's about. That was kind of funny, though. You say he don't go to New Jersey. There was this thing like when I lived in New York, too, like people would say that. They would be like, oh, no, we don't go to Jersey. And I'm like, well, damn. Let's dive into this part of the interview here.
Israel is America's friend. Israel is for supporting Israel is for the best interest. And I want to challenge that because there has been now as an American citizen, I don't think Israel is a good friend. Can you call a country a friend if they have a spy, Jonathan Pollard, who spied on America? And he was an American. He was not Israeli. He took a life sentence in 1987. And just to spy to the United States in 1995, Israel gave him the Israeli citizenship while he was in jail. That's a spite. Yep. And then he was released 2020 on a private jet sponsored by an American billionaire. Sheldon Adelson, and he was greeted at the airport by Benjamin Netanyahu. What kind of message do you give the people?
Adelson is the big Republican.
Yes.
Let me show you how Chris is focusing on the wrong thing here. Sheldon Adelson, right? He said Adelson is the big Republican. How would I have phrased this differently? Adelson is a billionaire. That's how I phrase it. Who cares if they're Republican or Democrat? I think it's more important that this guy is a billionaire. That's what you should be discussing. That's why he was able to just get a meeting like that with Netanyahu. That's what Bassem was talking about. Why do you think he was able to just meet Netanyahu like that? He's a billionaire. It's not because he's a Republican. It's because he got money. Let's go on.
Yes, but like what kind of message if the head of Israel is receiving like a hero? That okay, what about the Herzog affair, 1950, 1954, where Chaim Herzog was an attaché in Israeli embassy and he was recruiting spies with American soul and he was tipped off that the FBI is coming to him. He escaped and how he was rewarded? 2 times Israeli president, 1983, 1993, and he's the president of the father of the current president today. How can you call a country if the Apollo affair, where Rafi Eitan, an Israeli spy, stole 206 enriched uranium from New Mexico? How can you call them? How can you call a country that committed terrorist attack, killing an American citizen in American soil, and then they fled to Israel, and they're not. The JDL, 1985, Alex Oda, he was Christian, Palestinian American, and he was assassinated by 3 members of the JDL. And they escaped to Israel, and America could not get them back because Israel does not want to deliver. How can you call someone who commit an attempted assassination on an American diplomat, John Gunther Dean, our ambassador in Lebanon, and he wrote it in his memoir, and he said the American did not investigate it. What is the most lethal attack on American naval vessel in history in the Middle East?
USS Cole.
How many people died?
I don't remember, but a lot. I went and covered
17. How many people injured? 37. But that's not the most lethal. The most lethal attack on American naval vessel was USS Liberty, 9th of June, 1967. They were attacked by the Israeli army, and they killed 34 American soldiers, injured 171, and they paid $6 million in compensation. This is how worth the American lives it is to them. Can we call this a friend?
Yes. And here's why.
Okay.
No. And that's a good point that he mentioned there about them not being held accountable for crimes. But there's also something else. And I talked about this before on the show. Israel has also become a safe haven for people who have committed, let me put this here, child sex crimes, for people who have trafficked children, for people who have, that's a safe haven for them. Actually, and CNN did a whole segment about this. I'm surprised more people don't talk about it. But CNN actually did an entire segment about how Israel has become a safe haven for those criminals. Not kidding. They know that they can go there and they'll be fine and they'll be protected. So once again, it shows that Israel is not held accountable, not just in reference to this war with Gaza, not just in reference to occupation and oppression, but also in reference to criminal activity.
Because it's messy and it's a relative assessment. And you have the largest Jewish population outside of Israel is in America. Mm-hmm. And they're people of pride and prominence, and the connection politically and culturally has always been strong, and it's a relative assessment. You make a checklist going back to the 1950s of what Israel has done that was wrong. And now you have to compare it to everybody else in the region that is of any value to you. And you wind up with Israel being at the top of the heap. And look, I don't have any problem.
So there's Chris again acknowledging that he realizes it's all about value and benefits, right? So America doesn't want to have like a friend outside of the US unless there's some value there for the United States government. And what are we really saying when we do that? What are we really saying when they say, well, Israel is our friend and nobody else apparently is? Like, what? It gives people the impression that that group of people is better than other groups of people. When people see how the US government refers to Israel versus how they refer to Gaza and Palestinian people, it's obvious that the majority of the narrative that you see on mainstream media is obvious that they are actually putting the Israeli people above the Palestinian people. And you see Black commentators do it too, which is really sad. And you see Black politicians do it too, which is really, really sad. But why are they doing that? They're doing that because that's what they're paid to do. They're not paid to sympathize for the Palestinian people. They're not paid to sympathize for the people who are actually being oppressed. They're paid to sympathize with the people who are actually doing the oppressing.
I don't think the issue is that Israel has been misunderstood as an ally and they're an enemy. I don't think that's what it is. I think it's, what do you do when your allies are in bad situations? And there's situations that are at least in part of their own causing. What do you do? The problem is right now, the American answer is absolutely nothing, or as little as possible, because America's population is exhausted.
Let's pause here for a second because there's something else that I wanted to say there. What do you do when one of your allies has messed up or whatever? I would like to rephrase that because I don't want people to have that in the back of their head. Israel did not mess up. What Israel is doing has always been intentional. If you look at the Zionism project, this was always the plan to rid the population of the Palestinian people and just have the state expand. This is why they're attacking Lebanon as well. Hamas is not in Lebanon. They're attacking them right now. So to have the state of Israel expand and they actually have control over that whole region, that was the Zionism project. It's not just, oh, let's just have this little piece right here and just keep it what it is. But I had to push back on that narrative because I don't want you to walk away thinking Israel made a mistake. This is not a mistake. This was intentional. They knew exactly what they were going to do. They knew exactly how they were going to do it. And what was supposed to happen is the State Department would actually create the narrative so it would have, of course, the public support would be for the state of Israel. However, for the first time in my lifetime, that did not happen. Because particularly, especially a lot of the younger people, they are more aware. They grew up with social media. They know what's going on, right? So you have to think about that. We'll come back in here. Sorry about that. I had to skip through because that was a promo, and I don't do promos on this show.
The beginning, not in terms of historical reciprocity, but on October 8th, 7th, 8th, what should have happened? What do you believe should have been the series of events that would have led us to a better place than we're in now?
Well, see, notice how once again he's starting with October 7th. Because if you start before that, you have to acknowledge that Israel actually created this conflict because they were attacking the Palestinian people first. You have to acknowledge that.
Here's the problem with discussing this. You always reset the clock at October 7th. Always.
But here's why.
But you're missing what led.
I'm not missing.
Okay.
I know that the reason
remember
it
the
happened,
video that they circulated about you? Those punk ass white people on their pages on the right. They judge you for your reaction.
Yes.
But they didn't talk about what they have been doing.
That's exactly right. And I get it. October 7th didn't happen in a vacuum. I totally understand. But it's also about your standard of what kind of retaliation you will submit to as a natural consequence. There's no question that there is a state of oppression in what's happening in Palestine. Israelis will mention that. In polls, they'll say that they don't like the way it is.
But Chris Cuomo won't say this on News Nation. You guys paying attention to what's happening here? See, one thing I can tell you I can say is this. You have people that do two shows. So like Briahna Joy Gray, she's on Rising, but she also has Bad Faith podcasts. One thing I will say is that Bree stays consistent across the board. So however she describes what's happening to Israel and Gaza on Bad Faith, she'll have that same point of view on Rising when they bring up that subject, right? Chris Cuomo doesn't, though. This is what I'm trying to tell people. He's admitting on this show with this interview, he's admitting that there is oppression. But Chris Cuomo has interviewed multiple people on News Nation about this particular issue, and he's taking the side of being pro-Israel, and he's made excuses for Israel every time. So this is the wake-up call, folks. This shows you that he knows.
Except for Bibi's government and his ministers, which is, I believe, much more right, extreme, and anti-Palestine, anti-Brown, let's say, than the Israeli non-Brown population. So I know that. I know that October 7th wasn't the beginning. I know that for many, it was a cry of desperation. Okay. But what was done on October 7th, I don't think is subjective. I think objectively was something that was only done to provoke a response. You don't burn Jewish people and think that Israel's not going to come for you. Hamas, by all indications, which is why it got its leadership out of there, was anticipating exactly what happened. So assuming that you come in, you kill a bunch of their people, they're going to come for you. There's going to be warfare. Okay. That's not.
We can't, and I don't think any of us have denied that there were people that were killed. I don't think any of us have denied that. And Max Blumenthal has talked about this as well. None of us are, at least not to my knowledge, I don't think any of us are denying that, right? But I think he doesn't really understand what the objective was. I brought Solomon on the show and he explained this. Number one, the music festival wasn't supposed to happen. The music festival was only supposed to be a one-day event. So the day that they had planned to break free, there was supposed to be no music festival. The plan was supposed to be for them to capture some hostages in exchange for the negotiation of the Palestinian hostages that Israel has been keeping in prison. Remember, I told you Israel will just grab Palestinian people and they'll throw them in prison. No trial by jury, right? None of that. This is what they've been doing. So that is what was supposed to happen. But as you see, even now, when Hamas has once again said, ceasefire and you get the hostages, Netanyahu says no. So this is why I'm telling you, it was never about the hostages for Israel. Netanyahu said, fuck them people. He said, fuck them kids. He does not care about the hostages. If he cared about the hostages, he would have accepted the temporary ceasefire to get the rest of them back. He doesn't care about that. And I hope people in Israel wake up and see this. He don't care about you guys either. So that's the piece that Chris has to fully understand. Let's dive in a little bit more here.
Not a surprise to anybody. We would do the same thing. Okay. And scale wise, it was a big deal for Israel. What should have happened? We're 4 months in now, plus. What do you think should have happened? Like after the first week, do you believe that the world should have said, okay, that's enough? The numbers, they killed 1,000 or 1,500, whatever the number is. Now you've killed 10 times.
They already killed 5,000 in 2 weeks.
So let's say, should it have ended then? And if so, because that would be great, less killing is always better if you're humanistic. Then what? I don't understand the how of ending this right now. I know ceasefire, I get it. But how do I stop? I'll play Israel, okay? If I stop, okay, I'll stop. I'm beating you up too much. I'm killing too many people. I'm killing too many innocents. I'm killing too little Hamas. I can't get you. You're in the tunnels, and you have my people who I want back, who now I believe as many as a quarter of them are dead already. More. So they're supposed to matter. I'm not getting you anyway, and I'm killing all these innocents. I'll stop. How do they stop and not believe that they're not going to get attacked by Hamas as soon as Hamas
And how would Hamas stop not knowing that they believe that Israel will do the same? Here's the thing about October 7th. I think for both of our viewers, people who follow me and follow you, I think we really need to discuss the stuff that we can share information that I might not know. You've seen the video, I've not seen the video, the 47 minutes video. And I believe that what you've seen, other than the stuff that we've seen, you've seen people tied up, you've seen burnt corpses, you've seen mutilated bodies, right? Now, I want to talk about two things. Why is the connection about the Jewish people to Israel, which I understand, is that Jewish people have been persecuted for centuries. They've been pushed around from one country to another. They've been burned. They've been put in gas chambers. I really believe that kind of generational trauma is a huge thing that you cannot ignore. And that is why for them, Israel is not just a place. It's not just a country. It is an idea that no matter what happens to us in the world, we have a place that is strong, that can protect us, that it will never happen to us again. What happened in the under Babylon, under the Nazis, under the Russians, we have that place. So I understand that. And I understand the shock that happened on October 7th, like even that place is not safe anymore. So having said that, I want you to look at the other side. On the other side, every day for the Palestinian people is October 7th. Every day they are kidnapped from their homes. Every day they are killed. Every day I'm going to come to the burning. I'm come to the atrocities.
You also got to bring up the fact of mowing the lawn. So it's not like this is the first time that the IDF has attacked Gaza. This is not the first time. They've been doing this to these people for quite some time.
I'm not gonna miss anything, and I promise you I would. Because here's the thing about conversation. The thing that how people lose conversation is that when I don't show you the empathy that is deserved for your pain, and I understand that. So I see that. When November 4th, the first exchange, between the hostages, Israel released 240 children and women. 233 of them were never convicted. So basically, we call them prisoners because they're put in Israeli prison, but actually they go in the houses and they kidnap them on daily basis. Every single day, people are shot.
Well, they'll say it's a parallel system of justice for Israeli citizens, many of whom are not Jewish, right? And then there is this occupied, murky international standard of how you treat people when you are occupying them.
Yes.
And there's a different military type justice, but it is also deserving of scrutiny and criticism. And you have a lot of people without due process who've been held for a long time.
Absolutely.
But Israel is the only democracy in the East, though, right? You see how this... So here's the thing. Not to mention Palestinian people have been imprisoned when that's not even the person they were looking for. So some of the other examples that have been pointed out is the fact that the IDF may come looking for, like, you, for example, and they go to the house and you're not there, but your brother is there. So they'll take your brother instead of taking you because you weren't available. There's stories like that have come out, like of the West Bank and everywhere. So the thing is that you cannot oppress people and occupy people and expect the people not to rise up. We've seen this all throughout history. And what's really scary is that some of the pictures that I'm seeing online that were from the Holocaust, now I'm also seeing pictures from Israel that are similar. Repeating mistakes of their former oppressor.
For Palestinians, they're sitting at their homes and they're being kidnapped every day from their homes. Israel is the only country in the world that tries children in front of military courts, and they have a 99.7 conviction rate. There's nowhere in the world you have 99.7 conviction rate. And sometimes it's like, but they're terrorists. Okay, Zainab Araqat, 2010, her husband were killed, and then she posted on Facebook, "May God unite us in heaven." And because of that, Israel went to her house and they detained her for 8 months for acts of terrorism. So when
you hear this, guys? See, these are some of the things that are happening to these people. But then also, we also have to remember, they also torture Palestinians in the prison, too. They torture Palestinians. Some of the children have been abused. The children that they've been in prison. There was a woman that testified. Actually, she gave an interview and she explained that they were sexually assaulting some of the kids that they had there as prisoners. Remember, this is the safe haven place where sexual offenders can go to.
When Israel goes in with civil clothes and kill people in the hospital, kill 3, like they are terrorists. Said who? Israel. Who decides? So the whole thing about, like, when you have, out of the 240 people that were released by Israel, 107 were children. 65 were the age of 18, meaning that they were children when they acted. So the daily kidnapping happens and the daily killing happens there. We have just been microdosing it, and the world doesn't care about it until October 7th happens. Now let's talk about October 7th. October 7th is a fucking atrocity. It's a terrorist attack. It's terrible, and no one can ever. I cannot even imagine the Israelis' parents and family that went through that, and also the Jewish people who, as I said, they are connected to that place, thinking them it's a safe haven. For them, it's shattering. The people who were, but the problem is what happened, what we saw yesterday or afterwards. Anthony Blinken went on in front of Congress and he testified about an incident where Hamas terrorists went in. They gouged the father's eyes. They raped the mother. They chopped off her breasts. They amputated the child leg, and they cut the little fingers, the finger of a little boy, and then they had breakfast and laughed. That is a direct testimony from Zaka and Hezbollah United, 2 relief groups from Israel, that they have actually been exposed that all of the stuff that they said has been lies, and they have collected more than $50 million of donations because of these unverified lies. And this has been reported by the Israeli media, Haaretz, Channel 13, and Time of Israel.
So you guys hear this? again, the lies. There's been a lot of lies that have been told. And our state media basically tells us that, you know, when Israel makes these statements, when the IDF makes these statements, we're just supposed to believe what they say. But anytime information comes from Gaza on the ground, we're supposed to question it because it's coming from Gaza. Again, like I said, and, you know, all these people are complicit in this. They are continuing to show you that they feel that one group is better than the other. And they don't have to actually say those words. They show you that by their actions. They show you that by their behavior. So they don't actually have to say that we believe the Israeli people are better than the Palestinian people. But you see the actions. The US government will not okay a ceasefire. It was the only country that was not willing to okay the ceasefire. So we all see where the power sits. We see who holds the purse strings, and we see who is allowing this to continue. And I think that this is troubling for the United States as well, because the rest of the world, they're watching us, and they're not going to forget this. They're not going to forget that our government continued to give Israel weapons. So the reason why Israel has the military capability that it does is because of the United States. Hamas doesn't have all those things. They don't have powerful weapons the way that Israel does. So it's hard to even make the comparison between the two. One has an army, the other does not.
So this shock, the allegation, a huge part of it is something that you've seen burn bodies. But in the same time in Israel, people talk about the Hannibal Directive, where the Israel went in and indiscriminately, they shot Hellfire missiles from Apaches. They shot shells from tanks. There is an Israeli survivor. Her name is Yasmin Porat. She came on a podcast and she talked about being in a house with 14 other hostages and 40 terrorists, and said everybody was alive. And then the Israelis started their tanks shooting. All the 40 were killed, the terrorists, and 12 out of the 14 hostages were killed. That's an 85% kill rate. Now, let's talk about the decapitated babies. According to the official Israeli records, one baby was killed, Mila Cohen, 10 months, 12 children from the age to 2 to 9, 36 from the age from 12 to 19, a total of 49 innocent children who should never have been killed or even touched on that day. The biggest casualty was 421 people from the age of 20 or 40. The total number of people that killed with that day, 1,120 people, 29 people. 373 of them were police and military, and 759 civilians. No rape, no decapitation, nothing. All of these were refuted. Even the New York Times piece and the Guardian retracted them because they were taken for right. So if you have the highest rated official going in and saying lies, and now you created this image, I'm telling you, on the October 8th, when that happened, when I heard that the people were killed and decapitated, it's like, oh, fuck them. Go in and kill everybody. The Muslim, the Arabs, like that because that was the image I had. Does it make it less horrific that there are just 759 just killed, most of them killed by maybe firepower from the Israeli? No, it's still horrific. But you created that image, so people now are prepared and prepped to go in and kill everybody. This is blind rage. And what we did right now, what did you say? You say one time, like, I'm done playing the game, I'm done refereeing the game, I need to expose the game. What we did right now is investigation of journalists. The 40 decapitated baby became a myth, and everybody now believes. So if I talk about them, nobody wants to.
I don't think everybody believes it.
You see this? You see this? We're not going to go on too much longer here, but the thing about the decapitated babies like that, but again, the State Department, they planted that narrative. Nobody saw this happen. Nobody had any pictures, even though Joe Biden told that lie and said he saw pictures. He had to come back and he had to retract that statement. But they put that out there just to get enough support from the people to say, oh, yeah, well, that's it. Israel should go in there and just handle business or whatever. Then they had to come back and debunk it. It did not work this time. It did not work, and they're scrambling.
It was used as an emotional way to suck money, 50 million, and to allow people to say, all right, go and kill everybody.
There's no question that it was tremendously powerful, hearing that allegation.
So when I break down the numbers to you now, how do you
Here's my problem with breaking down the numbers. It's not new to me, okay?
I'm sure that you know.
I've heard this, and I accept it, by the way. Now, I can't say I know, but I'll say I accept it, because I can say that about all the numbers. Okay?
Absolutely.
And I can say that about when I was covering war in Iraq and Afghanistan. If I don't see it, I guess I can trust. I mean, the numbers are always in round numbers, you know. Which
but
is
these are official numbers from the Israelis.
I understand, but I don't know that makes them true. It's like, you know.
So who do you believe? These are
But I'm saying I think it's a problem. Okay. Because why? Well, because of motivation. You know, if I get attacked and I'm going to give you the description of the damage, there's every incentive for me to exaggerate it.
So let's go ahead. We'll stop it here. But you can watch the entire interview on his channel. But one of the things I wanted to say about that what he just said there at the very end about that conversation, he just let you know, like, he doesn't have to accept it. I can hear what they say about the numbers, but I don't have to accept it. Right? So watch the full interview, the discussion that he had with Bassem, and then I want you to check out News Nation later on this week. A little homework assignment. Check out News Nation a little bit later this week and watch Chris Cuomo still have the same talking points. I don't know who's running things over there at News Nation. I don't know what it is. I don't know if they're a part of the same company as Rising. They're also a part of Nexstar, right? So I don't know if it seems like maybe on Rising, they have a little bit more freedom to say what they think and how they feel. And maybe more so on News Nation, it's not that way. I don't know. But all I know is his talking points are still the same. So I don't feel like he's actually learning from these conversations that he's having, or he's just acting, right? Okay, let's go to some of the comments here. Thank you for the super chat, Sparky. Sabby, love, you have a brilliant colleague in Eric T. Red. Thank you so much. I'm sure Eric appreciates that as well. Soccer Papa says, Sabby, have you ever tried to get Ali Abunama or Nora Borse Friedman from the Electronic Intifada on? No, I have not, because I do not have their contact info. If I can find contact info for them, I would bring them on. Thank you. Lee says, thank you, Sabby. Israel did not mess up. The lie is that the U.S. and Israel are concerned about the Palestinian people or violations of international law. Yeah, there you go. Thank you for the super chat, Sherelle. Who produced that 47-minute video? Oh, that's a good question. Good question. Okay. If you guys have not had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button. If you're new, don't forget to sub and share. And we are moving on to Maine. So we are discussing the 2023 ballot initiative results. Again, I told you there are 9 states. We already started with Colorado. We are moving on to Maine. And then later on, around June-ish, we'll dive into the ballot measures that will be on the 2024 ballot this November. So let's dive in with Maine. Maine, that beautiful state to the north. Why does it have to tell me that my Dropbox is full? Anyway, citizens of Maine may initiate legislation through the process of indirect initiative. In Maine, successful petitions are first presented to the Maine state legislature. If the measure is not adopted without change or is vetoed by the governor, the law is placed before the voters. The legislature may submit any amended form, substitute, or recommendation to the people alongside the bill. This alternative is treated as a competing measure. In Maine, citizens also have the power to repeal legislation via veto referendum. Maine residents may not amend their constitution via initiative or directly initiate legislation. The Maine state legislature may also place measures on the ballot as legislatively referred constitutional amendments or legislatively referred state statutes. Check this out. Single subject rule. Maine does not employ a single subject rule. And that's interesting because a lot of the states that I've talked about do. So for Maine, you can have multiple subjects a part of one ballot initiative. That's pretty interesting. And this part here, subject restrictions. Maine does not restrict the subject matter of initiated measures. However, if there are insufficient state funds available for a measure and the initiated measure does not specify a sufficient funding source, the measure's effective date is delayed to allow the legislature to appropriate funds. Such measures take effect 45 days after the start of the next legislative session. So that's important to know. Do I want to dive into deadlines for collection? I think this part is always important. In Maine, signatures are valid for 1 year after the date they were signed. However, signatures may be collected up to 18 months after the petition form is furnished by the Secretary of State. Signatures must be filed with the Secretary by the 50th day of the first regular legislative session or the 25th day of the second regular session. So in other words, you really don't have 18 months, you have 12. That's right. Signatures for veto referendums are due 90 days after the adjournment of the legislative session at which the targeted bill was passed. This is interesting. Supermajority requirements. Maine initiatives do not require a supermajority for approval. This also applies to legislatively referred constitutional amendments. Moving on. And reattempting initiative. Maine does not limit how soon an initiative can be reattempted. So for my state, Massachusetts, we do have a limit. So for example, we had ranked choice voting on the ballot in 2020. It did not pass. We have to wait a certain number of years before we can bring that to the ballot again. So Maine apparently does not have that rule. Really interesting, actually. We'll go to the first initiative and then we'll finish Maine later this, I think tomorrow night. Yeah, because I'll be live tomorrow night. So we'll finish Maine tomorrow night. Maine question 1. Voter approval of borrowing above $1 billion by state entities and electric cooperatives initiative. A yes vote supported requiring voter approval for certain state entities, municipal electric districts, electrification cooperatives, or consumer-owned transmission utilities to incur a total outstanding debt that exceeds $1 billion. This was approved by 65.47%. What does this do? This ballot measure required voter approval for certain state entities, municipal electric districts, electrification cooperatives, or consumer-owned transmission utilities to incur a total outstanding debt that exceeds $1 billion and required a state by the state treasurer to accompany the ballot question regarding the estimated costs of the increased debt. What did this measure have to do with Pine Tree Power Company initiative? The initiative was designed to prohibit quasi-independent state entities, reporting entities, municipal electric districts, consumer-owned transmission and distribution utilities, cooperatives or rural electrification cooperatives from incurring a total outstanding debt that exceeded $1 billion useless approved by voters at a general election. Entities exempt from the voter approval requirement from borrowing over $1 billion under this measure included the Maine Public Employees Retirement System, the Finance Authority of Maine, the Maine Health and Higher Education Facilities Authority, the Department of Transportation, the Maine Turnpike Authority, municipalities and counties, and the Maine Municipal Bond Bank, and for certain education-related programs. So it's interesting. Question 3, another initiative for November 7th, 2023 on the Maine ballot was designed to create the Pine Tree Power Company, a municipal consumer-owned electric transmission and distribution utility. This measure was designed to replace CMP and Versant, two investor-owned utilities that service the majority of Maine residents. Who were the campaigns surrounding this ballot measure? No Blank Checks and Maine Affordable Energy both led the campaign in support of the initiative. The Maine Affordable Energy Coalition also opposed the creation of Pine Tree Power Initiative, an initiative which proposed creating the Pine Tree Power Company. As of October 24th, No Blank Checks and Maine Affordable Energy collectively reported $23 million in contributions and $21.6 million in expenditures. Very interesting, ladies and gentlemen. Who supported this Corporations, Avangrid Inc., organizations, Maine State Chamber of Commerce, Sportsman Alliance of Maine. One of the arguments was no blank checks is about as common sense as it gets. If we are going to be on the hook for billions of dollars in government debt, voters should get the final say on whether to take that on. There was no opposition to this. Yeah. No campaign opposition to it. And if you look at the amount of money that was spent, again, usually, how does this work? Typically, when you look at support or oppose, typically the area that has the most money that was spent to support or oppose it, usually the one with the most money wins. So there was over, 24 million? Wow. Over $24 million, it looks like, cash contributions to support. And then you have $0 that was spent to oppose it. So, and it passed. So that's just something to always pay attention to, how much money was spent. And a note from Roger here, Sabby, in essence, this was an initiative to be put up as an obstacle to stationalize power or electrical cooperative, by saying that if a consumer state-owned power was to incur debt over $1 billion, they'd have to ask the voters to exceed that. Knowing that, since it would not be for a profit power company, it most likely would not exceed or even get near that amount to operate, which is why the two investor shareholder corporations, CMP and Versant, were opposed to it, because they had so much invested in maintaining shareholder owned power companies. They saw the long-term benefits to consumers of what Nebraskan voters did in 1930, an initiative to approve the state power utilities. And tomorrow night, I will be live tomorrow night at my usual time. We'll pick back up with the Maine ballot measures, and we got a couple other stories to discuss as well. So that's it for me tonight, guys. Don't forget, Scott Ritter will be here as well later on this week. I haven't decided if I'll do that as a live stream yet or as a premiere, but just know that Scott will be here. So look forward to that. So you'll either see that Wednesday afternoon as a live, or you will see it Thursday as a premiere. So I'll see you guys tomorrow night. You know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.